they're no longer going to allow themselves to be ruled by decree.
Okay, some reactions from the Russian Area Studies program at Georgetown University here in Washington. Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Bruce. Let's go back live to Moscow and Sergei Plekhanov, our friend and CBS News consultant. Sergei, it's good to see you. We're glad you came through this all right. But let's get to some analysis. Do you think that it's all over now, that this is the end of the reactionary movement in the Soviet Union, and that Gorbachev and Yeltsin, hopefully in tandem, can dramatically pick up the pace of change?
I really hope that this is a very strong blow to the reactionary forces. I hope that this is a decisive battle which has been decisively won by the people, by the forces of democracy. It will be very difficult for the key forces of the right wing to get back up to the kinds of strengths that they had before the coup. This was a major showdown, but more importantly, this is a real revolution. This is a new phase in the process of change which started 6 years ago. There's a tremendous opening for a radical movement onward. And the most important thing that Gorbachev could have said today is that this is a great opportunity for movement ahead, radical. And he did say that. He did say that, but he will have to back up these words with very serious, very strong actions which would lead us to decentralization of power, transfer of real power to the republics, and the creation of a new union state. Because the old union state lies in shambles. It turned against the people, and it was defeated by the people. It's a stinking corpse, and it will have to be replaced by something. And people like Moiseev, these are not the kinds of people that we want to see at the head of our armed forces. We have other generals who have shown whose side they're on.
Sergei, is it or is it not accurate to say that a lot of problems remain, and there's no clean set of solutions anywhere in sight? You've expressed hope, but pragmatically, is there a real belief that you're somehow nearing the end of the problem-solving process and are right on the cusp of a whole new day?
We are at the dawn of a new day in the Soviet Union. The events of the past 3 days have settled the big questions which we've been grappling with here in this country for several years. Are we still slaves, or are we already free?
I hear some... I'm sorry, I'm hearing something behind you, and I wanted to explain to our viewers and listeners that that's the celebration around the Yeltsin headquarters at the Russian parliament, which is wafting over this balcony where Sergei Plekhanov is talking.
Has been decisively solved for us. We are free, and we will, from now on, act upon this firm knowledge.
Thank you, Sergei Plekhanov. Thank you very much, Sergei. We were beginning to have some audio problems there, so if you thought that ended rather abruptly, it did because of that fact. We'll try to get back to Sergei perhaps a little later on. He and his family, of course, as with many of those who worked for and under Mikhail Gorbachev over the years, really felt the danger and the pressure over the last few days. Joining me again now, Steve Cohen. Steve, let's try to look ahead. What kind of government is Gorbachev likely to form to try to take this lurch forward, jump forward that Sergei Plekhanov expressed a hope about?
I think it's likely to be a coalition government in the fullest sense of the word. That is, Gorbachev people and Yeltsin people, the two wings of the pro-democratic, pro-reform camp. Coalition in the sense of well-known names and some new names. Coalition in the sense that it is time, after all, to bring younger people in. Mr. Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev are 60 years old. There's a generation of political figures now on the scene closer to 40. I think some of those people will be brought in, but you're absolutely right. The problems, humongous problems, remain. This coup solved no problem, but nor did it put forward any easy solution. It's easy enough to say now it's time for Mr. Gorbachev to move quickly. But how? In what direction? With what means? For example, everybody understands, everybody, even the conservatives understand, that the country must have a market economy. But how do you create a market and economy that never had one, and where polls show more than 50% of the people don't want one?
See, it's very clear out of Washington. Jack Nelson and former CBS News correspondent Robin Wright had a story in the Los Angeles Times this morning. It's very clear. that sources within the Bush administration are beginning to hedge their bets on Gorbachev. They're saying such things as, well, Gorbachev may just wind up to be a figurehead. And Gorbachev is likely to be, according to these anonymous analyzers, somewhat irrelevant as Yeltsin rises. What are we to make of this?
Well, one understands why they're doing that. They want to leave the administration an escape hatch. The administration's made a major commitment to Gorbachev, and just in case he's no longer the major figure, they want to be in a position to say that they knew what they were doing. I regret this for two reasons. First of all, Russia needs both of these men, both of the leaders of both wings of democratic reform, to carry this off. I believe it's still a minority movement in Russia, and in the Soviet Union, reform, that is. Secondly, Russia's problem in terms of politics for a century has been a focus on the leader. Let the leader decide. Give the power to the leader. What Russia has lacked is government by process, by parliament, and by laws. It's now time to focus on the parliamentary process. It's interesting that Yeltsin took refuge in the free Russian parliament, thereby directing the focus not so much to himself, but to that elected parliament as the symbol of Russia's democratic future, if she's going to have one. The problem is there aren't many cities in Russia that have a free parliament, and it's going to take a long time and cooperation, I think, by Gorbachev and Yeltsin to move that process forward.
Steve Cohen, thanks. Winston Churchill said in 1942, quote, "The problems of victory are more agreeable than those of defeat, but they are no less difficult." And perhaps Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin are beginning to think along the same lines. Dan Rather with Steve Cohen, Jonathan Sanders, and the CBS News team. We'll have full coverage tonight on the CBS Evening News.
The coup collapses has been a CBS News special report. This is CBS.
You got the right one, baby.
You got the right one, baby. You got the right one, baby. You got the right thing.
And angry, but still defending a place for the Communist Party.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Reporting tonight from NBC News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Mikhail Gorbachev is back in the Kremlin tonight, still alive, still in office, but his power and his future seems to be significantly diminished. As he begins the process of working that out with Boris Yeltsin and the others who saved him, the people now have reclaimed the streets of their country. We begin tonight with NBC's Jim Maceda in Moscow.
First, defenses came down. The last tanks loyal to Boris Yeltsin abandoned positions they'd held for 4 days. For those they had protected, the first sign the coup had really failed. The barricades came down. Mikhail Gorbachev had returned, but the people around the Russian parliament building were more interested in seeing their real hero, Yeltsin. Already something was stirring.
The coup leaders, the KGB, those were the dark forces in our country. Now we've beat them.
A dragon had been slain, an age-old burden lifted.
Now we'll be able to breathe freely, walk freely, live freely. This is the real revolution.
Hello.
The crowd moved through Red Square, marking one symbol, Lenin's tomb. And it wasn't Gorbachev in these Russians' hearts.
If there weren't Yeltsin, we wouldn't have a leader we'd listen to.
As the noose went around the neck of Felix Dzerzhinsky, founder of the KGB, officers inside could only watch in disbelief. Outside, people were beginning to believe in a new emotion, joy.
I think this day give us a new future.
As cranes were brought in to topple the statue of oppression, some reflected on what the new revolution would bring.
You laugh to feel freedom.
For others, the joy of the moment was enough. Jim Maceda, NBC News, Moscow.
Many were surprised that Gorbachev didn't go first to the Russian parliament to publicly and personally thank Yeltsin for holding the line against the coup and saving Gorbachev. NBC's Bob Abernethy tonight takes us through Gorbachev's first day back on the job and the many challenges ahead. Bob?
Tom, angry, shaken, and bitter, Mikhail Gorbachev tried to pick up his presidency today after 72 hours as the prisoner of men he thought he could trust.
Early this morning, looking deeply tired, Gorbachev arrived back in Moscow with his family. Their ordeal had caused Raisa Gorbachev to have a bad spell yesterday, Gorbachev said, but he hoped it was temporary. Gorbachev thanked all those who'd saved democracy here and his life.
I recognize the role played by the Russian people and by their president, Boris Yeltsin.
Yeltsin, the hero of the resistance, drew a standing ovation at the Russian parliament and, to applause with every name, announced the fates of the coup leaders. Acting President Yanayev, arrested. Defense Minister Yazov, arrested. KGB Chief Khrushchev, arrested. Prime Minister Pavlov, hospitalized and under guard. Interior Minister Pugo, a reported suicide. Others arrested or soon to be. Later, Yeltsin thanked the people who had defended him and Russia's parliament. Russia, he said, had saved the Union. Gorbachev also got a standing ovation today at a news conference where he described how his own chief of staff had led his captors to him.
I said you are adventurers. You will ruin yourselves, goddamn you. You will ruin the country, too.
Gorbachev did not give details, but he charged his captors had tried to break him psychologically. Gorbachev was asked many times why he had appointed the kind of men who would attempt a coup. I trusted them, he said, especially Defense Minister Yazov and former KGB Chief Khrushchev. He acknowledged his mistake.
This is a severe test for me to be so disappointed.
It's ironic that Gorbachev, the victim, should be weakened by the coup, but that seems to be the fact. Tomorrow, Gorbachev sits down with the strengthened Yeltsin and the leaders of other republics to talk about how to clean house and share power. Tom?
Thank you, Bob. During that meeting with Gorbachev, Yeltsin and the other leaders of the most powerful republics will not be in a mood to compromise, and key to the meeting will be the Baltics, with a long history of differences with Moscow. Today, Estonia officially outlawed the Communist Party. NBC's Dennis Murphy managed to get to Tallinn.
The Estonian parliament went on the hunt today. Prime Minister Edgar Savizar called out the names of the alleged collaborators, the Estonians who helped the Soviet hardliners in the bungled coup. The port manager fired. Managers of the Russian factories rooted out. Some police names, some radio broadcasters, now facing prosecution and dismissal.
It's obvious who is who. And it's also important for us here in Estonia because some part of our political forces have played very dirty games until now.
It almost went unnoticed that Estonia had declared its independence from the Soviet Union in the dark hours when Soviet soldiers seized the republic's TV broadcast tower. A bloody confrontation was diffused by the Prime Minister. After 10 minutes of negotiations with the soldiers, they left, retreating to their barracks. Today, the Estonian government demanded that the Soviets recall certain commanders and limit the role of their military here. In neighboring Latvia, Soviet soldiers killed the director of the TV station there. In Lithuania, where the parliament was barricaded, a local militiaman died in fighting. Today, in Estonia's capital, the nervous tension dissolved in a street party. Some saw independence unexpectedly peeking around the corner.
Today, it's very important, very, very important. It's the first free day of our life.
Now all three Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, have declared their independence from the Soviet Union. They still don't trust Gorbachev, but Yeltsin is a big, big hero. The Balkan state leaders think they see real independence now in the collapse of the hardliners. But recognition is up to the United States and the West, and whoever or whatever emerges as the Soviet government. Dennis Murphy, NBC News, Tallinn, Estonia.
When we continue in a moment, Gorbachev's new men. What do the White House and the Pentagon think of them?
With the chalky taste of some antacids, it can seem that the cure is worse than the pain. Introducing new Mylanta Cherry and Cool Mint Creams, the best tasting antacids, blended creamier for a non-chalky taste.
No wonder my doctor said Mylanta. These days, there are more pain relievers than ever. But last year, more people switched to Tylenol gel caps than any other. Extra strength Tylenol gel caps. Concentrated, powerful, easy to swallow. Join the switch to Tylenol gel caps.
It's the last 3 days to save at Color Tile. Big savings up to 25 to 50% off ticketed prices. Color Tile, like ceramic tiles now 49 cents. Vinyl styles now 51 cents. All DuPont Stainmaster carpet drastically reduced 25 to 50% off ticketed prices. For example, now only $11.99 a square yard. Plus mini blinds, wall coverings, and wood flooring too. Color Tile, it's your last chance to save 25 to 50% off ticketed prices. Color Tile, only through Sunday.
With Gorbachev now back in the Kremlin, U.S. officials are taking a hard look at the man that he has appointed as his new defense minister, General Mikhail Mosaev. NBC White House correspondent John Cochran tonight.
Tom, the Kennebunkport White House gave a restrained welcome back to Gorbachev. The president himself said all the right things in public, but his aides, who have the advantage of anonymity, were downright critical of Gorbachev. And I'm told that is how Bush himself really feels. The president's aides may have been playing the bad cop, but Bush was the good cop, refusing, for example, to criticize Gorbachev for choosing a suspected hardliner as his new defense minister.
That doesn't exactly come under the heading of our business. I would be a little resentful if somebody told me who I ought to have in my cabinet from Moscow.
And Bush refused to buy the idea that Gorbachev looks weaker because others had to save him, like Boris Yeltsin.
Now, if you ask me, has Boris Yeltsin's stature been enhanced? The answer is clearly yes. But this jumping on Gorbachev, who was taken and held under house arrest with his wife and grandchild, I'm simply not going to be a part of that.
Bush joined the Japanese and West Europeans in lifting the temporary suspension of economic aid to Moscow. But Bush does have an agenda he wants Gorbachev to follow. Move much faster toward a free market economy, reduce military spending, cut off help to Castro's Cuba, and, most important, agree to independence for the Baltic states.
Perhaps recent events will speed the day when you have an agreed path set out for independence of these states. In my view, that would do more to enhance goodwill in the United States than almost any other single thing that could be done.
So Bush is sending a message. The hardliners are in disarray, and you, Mikhail Gorbachev, no longer have any excuse for moving so slowly toward reform. It is time, Bush thinks, for the real Gorbachev to stand up. Tom?
Thank you, John. General Mosaev is attracting more attention in other quarters as well. A White House official says he wouldn't want Mosaev away. At the Pentagon, however, officials say this is a man they can do business with. NBC's Fred Francis.
Tom, a sharp criticism of Gorbachev's new defense chief is a cheap shot, according to one Pentagon official, who described General Mosaev as a near-perfect pick.
The slap at Moiseev by a senior administration official was repeated by Soviet specialists who questioned his loyalty for the job.
He decided to support Gorbachev only when the coup began to collapse and communications between Gorbachev and Moscow were restored.
But those accusations belie everything the Pentagon and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs have learned about the 52-year-old Soviet soldier. Knowledge of Moiseev is extensive and current. General and Mrs. Colin Powell were the guest of the Mosaevs last month. One official said they may not be kissing cousins, but the two generals have become friends. While together, the two spoke of the discontent in the Soviet Union, both in the streets and in the ranks. Moiseev supports reforms, but is not the loudest cheerleader. Powell spoke warmly of Moiseev and confidently of their relationship, saying to senior Soviet officers, quote, "General Moiseev and I are now standing side by side looking toward this new vision of the future. I invite you all to stand beside us." During the coup, Moiseev was standing with 99% of all Soviet officers on the sidelines. One senior defense official theorized that Moiseev's selection as the new defense minister was so swift today that he either warned Gorbachev of the coup or was warned by Gorbachev to take a few days off. Another analyst said Moiseev is well respected by the leadership of the Soviet Union's 4.5 million soldiers, and his appointment is political reward to them for staying out of the coup.
A coup that we know now was doomed from the start. General Moiseev was out of it, and it was something like Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney trying to take over this country without General Colin Powell by his side. No chance, Tom.
Thank you. Fred Francis of the Pentagon tonight. To prevent another military coup attempt, by the way, Boris Yeltsin and his counterpart in the Ukraine said today that they would form their own national guards for security.
The all-new Pontiac Bonneville. Its anti-lock brakes proof-tested to be ready when needed. Its airbag deployed countless times, so it's hoped you'll never see it. Redesigned, re-engineered, and ready to ride. The all-new Pontiac Bonneville.
Like Coach always said, hit him in the numbers. Who do the pros call for an all-pro deal on hot, delicious pizza? Who do you think?
Hello, Domino's Pizza.
Call now for Domino's kickoff deal. 2 medium cheese pieces with 4 servings of Coca-Cola Classic or Diet Coke for just $9.99. Add your favorite toppings for just a little extra. And get free NFL quarterback trading cards.
Only from Domino's.
Call now, dude.
Your high-fiber cereal.
Tastes like a high-fiber cereal.
But my high-fiber cereal is different.
Why? Because it comes in a big red box?
No, because it's delicious.
Really?
It's the only one with this delicious combination of raisins, dates, nuts, and crunchy clusters.
Keeps sounding better and better.
And crispy high-fiber bran flakes.
That makes it perfect.
That makes it fruit and fiber.
That makes fruit and fiber my high-fiber cereal.
Post fruit and fiber cereal.
Delicious.
Why would you want your fiber any other way?
Joined now by one of our resident Soviet affairs experts, William Hyland, who's the editor of Foreign Affairs Quarterly. Mr. Hyland, do you think that the Soviet Confederation will come very swiftly and the Soviet Union is now gone?
I think it's nearly gone, Tom. I think the rebuilding process that now has to begin is going to be extensive. They've got to rebuild a central government. There's really no 25 ministers supported the coup, silently at least. They've got to rebuild relations with between Russia and the central government and the other republics. They've got to take some action on the economy. So I think the old way of doing business is simply gone.
In their meeting tomorrow, will Boris Yeltsin be dictating to Mikhail Gorbachev, in your judgment?
Well, I think that may be a little strong, but that's what it amounts to, because he has all the high cards. He is the victor in this struggle. Gorbachev looked poignant, I thought, in his remarks and his attempt to explain himself and to try and understand what had happened. And I think Yeltsin is the man of the hour.
What about the Baltics? Any chance the United States will recognize them in the next 6 months or so?
I think the Baltics are on their way to complete independence. Indeed, I think by Christmas the Baltics will be independent of whatever that country is called, the Soviet Union, the USSR. And the United States will probably have a rather substantial bill on its hands to help them out.
Were you surprised today when Mikhail Gorbachev refused to reject the Communist Party as an ongoing enterprise in the Soviet Union?
Not really, because I think that's the one thing that's been difficult to understand about Gorbachev. He is a true believer in the Communist Party and its system. He's been trying to reform it, but even now he doesn't seem to understand that it was that system that tried to overthrow him, indeed may have threatened his life.
William Hyland, editor of Foreign Affairs Quarterly, who has been with us on so many of these occasions and probably will be again. We'll be back with the story of Jim Baker asking for a new sentence in a moment.
As
another symbol of communist oppression comes down. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. This is the day they tore down the statue of the KGB. A new beginning for Mikhail Gorbachev and the Soviet Union. Gorbachev's back and cleaning some house and denouncing those who plotted to overthrow him. Correspondent Anthony Mason in Moscow begins our coverage of Gorbachev's return.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev.
Restored to power and returned from captivity, Mikhail Gorbachev today admitted that the coup which toppled him for 72 hours was in part his own mistake, an act of betrayal by his own close aides.
People whom I, myself, promoted, whom I believed, whom I trusted, and they turned out to be not only participants in that plot, but organizers of that conspiracy.
Returning early this morning from the vacation home where he'd been held with his family and security guards, Gorbachev said his captors had surrounded his house and cut all outside communication. Their aim, he said, was to break the president, but I would have considered suicide rather than give in to their conspiracy. Gorbachev remembered the exact time, the 18th of August,
10 minutes to 5 p.m.
when the phone suddenly went dead and he was told the delegation demanded to see him. They carried an ultimatum that he resign.
So I said to them, you and those who sent you are adventurers. You will ruin yourselves, but God damn you, that's up to you. If you want to ruin yourselves, but you will ruin the country, and what will be done?
Gorbachev produced a tape of a statement he recorded in captivity, the real story which he was hoping to have smuggled out. On Moscow street corners today, crowds stopped to listen to Gorbachev tell his story. But many Soviets have not been sympathetic. Anyone could see these men were scoundrels, said this Soviet journalist. Why did you appoint them to your government? Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov, Gorbachev said, seemed moderate, and he thought KGB Chief Khrushchev a cultured man. But even his personal security chief, Medvedev, betrayed him.
Maybe I don't know certain things. You will say, this does not clear me of responsibility that I should have known. Well, you see a man for whom this is great personal drama. This is one thing that I have to say, that this is a severe test for me to be so disappointed.
Gorbachev returned to his duties today, greeting European ambassadors. He's promised a regrouping of his government, but he insists the Communist Party can still be reformed, and he has no plans to abandon it.
I am a committed socialist.
But that principle may now pose the greatest threat to Gorbachev's leadership. The Democrats who saved him, like Yeltsin, Shevardnadze, and Yakovlev, are fast moving away from the party. Gorbachev said today he's learned some valuable lessons in the last 72 hours, but many Democrats are already saying the coup did not teach him enough. Dan?
Thanks, Anthony. Now, what about the group of aides who tried to topple Gorbachev? Some were nobodies, but some were once among the most powerful men in the Soviet Union. Now, Gorbachev's trusted vice president arrested. The prime minister in the hospital. The defense minister arrested. Chairman of the KGB arrested. Interior minister committed suicide. First deputy chairman of the defense council, as a member of parliament, he's immune from arrest. The president of the Association of State Enterprises arrested. And the head of the Farmers Union also has parliamentary immunity. CBS News has obtained exclusive videotape of two of the coup leaders showing them in captivity tonight in an undisclosed location outside Moscow. KGB chairman Vladimir Khrushchev and former defense minister Dmitry Yazov, who's not seen on camera, spoke with a Soviet journalist. Afraid, both men expressed regret for what they did, and Yazov said he still has deep respect for Gorbachev. Perhaps the biggest loser in the wake of the bungled coup is the Communist Party. CBS News chief European correspondent Tom Fenton reports angry Muscovites hammered away at the party today.
Young Soviets scrambled to the top of the giant statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky, founder of the Soviet secret police. In full view of KGB headquarters, They attached a noose to the neck of the most hated symbol of communist repression. City policemen didn't know what to do. They had never seen anything like this.
I am sure that the organization is criminal, that the leaders of the Communist Party, that they are criminals, and they should be put on trial.
Tens of thousands of Soviets were drawn today to this sinister place where no citizen dared linger in the old days.
Several years ago, I was questioned in this house for talking to foreigners.
Like you're talking to me?
Yes, like talking to you.
But today, it was KGB agents who were afraid, cowering inside their headquarters.
No, we are not afraid to look at those windows. And that's really the moment, the circle.
Something fundamental has happened here. People have lost their fear of the most repressive arm of the communist apparatus. And once they lose that fear, the balance of power has been changed in this country.
Party members were hotly criticized in the streets. You sold out Russia, says this woman. At least we're working, not shouting like you, says the man. Another citizen retorts that you are exploiting the workers. But physical attacks were limited to symbols of the hated past. Tonight, the street sign of Marx Avenue was smashed under the nose of the police. A swastika was daubed on the front of KGB headquarters. And then there was a public hanging of the statue of Dzerzhinsky in front of the House of Terror that he founded. With a roar of approval from the crowd, he was lifted off the pedestal where he had loomed over Moscow, and the KGB was revealed to be a hollow giant. Dzerzhinsky was carted off to the dustbin of history, and with him the Soviets hoped tonight a system that kept the communists in power in this country for more than 7 decades. Tom Benton, CBS News, Moscow.
For Boris Yeltsin, this was a day to enjoy newfound power and hard-won respect. Jonathan Sanders is outside Yeltsin's stronghold tonight, the Russian Parliament building. Jonathan?
Dan, once regarded simply as the blunt bulldozer of radical reform, Boris Yeltsin emerged today a national hero.
The Russian Parliament's standing ovation for its president had hardly ended when the chairman said, "We are victorious. Victorious because our cause was just." The Russian national anthem has become a virtual fanfare for this uncommon common man, building engineer turned leader. He and his huge republic defied the coup and won rewards for the entire nation. Russia saved democracy, he said, and the history books will write, Russia saved the Union. The tanks surrounding Yeltsin's building left for good just after dawn, and outside the parliament, yet another enormous rally celebrated a people's army that empowered both the resistance and Yeltsin. This week in the Soviet capital, 3 chants became synonymous. Freedom, Russia, Yeltsin. All day it was rumored that Gorbachev would break with tradition and pay Yeltsin and the Russian parliament a courtesy call. It did not happen. But Gorbachev's best and brightest did come. Alexander Yakovlev, the godfather of glasnost, said, Yeltsin has brought the empire to an end. He has brought freedom to all people. The people of Moscow carried Russia's pre-Soviet flag from Parliament to Red Square today. As one person put it, from Yeltsin's building of light to the heart of darkness.
In more than 1,000 years of Russian and Soviet history, Democrats have seldom triumphed. This is one of those all-too-rare incidents of democracy riding high, at least for now, with a courageous Siberian in the saddle. Dan?
Jonathan Sanders, thank you. New indications that it was, as much as anything else, the inability of the coup leaders to command the big red military machine that helped to do them in. Jim Stewart, our man at the Pentagon, has been told that of the 180 Red Army divisions, only 15 were ever alerted by the coup leaders. Only 5 divisions ever left their garrisons. The failed coup is being seen as a blessing in disguise in the Baltic states, a new chance to put additional pressure on President Bush and advance the cause of independence. Peter Van Sant is in Estonia.
Like a beaten enemy, Soviet troops early this morning retreat from Tallinn, Estonia.
after the coup they supported collapsed. It was a feeling of victory for the Estonian people, who had feared their dreams of independence would be crushed. At first light, the last of the soldiers rode out of town.
We don't belong to Soviet Union anymore.
Barricades still surround the Estonian parliament. The only soldiers left in town are unarmed Estonian guards. Leaders of Estonia's government today called on the West to recognize Estonia as a sovereign nation. Political leaders say the failed coup in Moscow has given new life and legitimacy to their independence movement.
It gave more speed to historical development, and barriers which were obstacles for us, they were broken by this coup.
In Latvia, celebrations started yesterday with an independence rally and a parliament vote to secede from the Soviet Union.
The only right thing was to pass this declaration and to declare Latvia an independent state.
Latvians cheered as Soviet soldiers boarded buses. A report claims they left behind 4 dead and at least 10 wounded in an especially cruel crackdown. In Lithuania today, emboldened President Landsbergis demanded acceptance of his republic's independence and called on President Gorbachev to give his people justice and freedom. There is a festive mood in the Baltics tonight, a belief that their enemies, as well as Gorbachev, have been swept aside, and that real independence may be within their grasp. Peter Van Sant, CBS News, Tallinn.
White House correspondent Susan Spencer joins us now live from President Bush's vacation headquarters in Maine. Susan, the pressure remains on President Bush to change policy toward the Baltics.
It does indeed, Dan, but President Bush still insists that formal recognition of the Baltic states would be premature and that the coup hasn't really changed that. Nonetheless, today he was urging Gorbachev to seize the opportunity and speed up the process of granting the Baltics independence.
That would do more to enhance goodwill in the United States than almost any other single thing that could be done.
It also would be an acknowledgement and a tip of the hat to Boris Yeltsin, who has long supported Baltic independence. The administration is leaving for another day decisions on precisely how it will deal with him, hoping he and Gorbachev will forge an alliance that eliminates the need to pick sides. That would mean the emergence of what one senior official today called the real Gorbachev, one who not only would grant the Baltics independence, but rein in the KGB and the military and work for speedier economic reform. Today, Mr. Bush was pushing for all of it.
With some of the harder liners on the sidelines, clearly, that perhaps frees up President Gorbachev to work very closely with President Yeltsin.
One not so very encouraging sign, Gorbachev's selection today of a General Mosaiev to be his defense chief. As one senior administration official put it, Mosaiev was at best ambivalent during the coup, adding Riley, "I wouldn't want that guy behind me in a dark hall right now." Dan?
Susan Spencer, thanks. And so, a new era begins in the Soviet Union, a new chance to overcome the ongoing crisis of the country's political, social, and economic problems. At least the coup is over. We'll be back with more of the day's news in a moment.
I thought all nose and sprays were just like Pam. Boy, was I wrong.
Only Pam is all natural with no preservatives. Only Pam.
And Pam adds virtually no fat or calories for healthier meals.
All natural Pam. A healthier way to cook.
Did you know that when Alexander Graham Bell was about to invent the telephone, he stopped work because he ran out of money? Today at AT&T, we understand how important money is to a small business. So we developed AT&T Pro Watts, our discount calling plan that gives you AT&T quality at extremely competitive prices. At AT&T, almost half our business comes from small business. When you succeed, we succeed.
I need a laxative that can work dependably.
Doxadan can.
But can it be gentle?
Doxadan can. Doxadan works dependably overnight with a special ingredient for gentle release.
Dependable, yes. Gentle, yes.
Doxadan can.
In the aftermath of the collapsed coup in Moscow, world financial markets were up again today, regaining more of their losses. In New York, the Dow added another 5.5 points to yesterday's 88-point surge. Now, here's a look at some other stories CBS News is covering. In New England, they're still assessing the damage, and thousands remain without power after Monday's hurricane. More heavy rain since Monday has slowed the cleanup. In Charlotte, North Carolina, former TV preacher Jim Baker was brought to court in shackles.
Jim Maceda is now reporting live from Moscow. Jim, tell us about the resignation.
Good morning again, Ann. Well, it is official. The Foreign Ministry here in Moscow has confirmed the resignation of Alexander Besmyatnik as Foreign Minister. And as you mentioned, Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin met today for the first time since that failed coup attempt. And while Gorbachev will no doubt try to put the coup behind him, Yeltsin has other ideas.
As Mikhail Gorbachev met in the Kremlin today with Boris Yeltsin and other Republic leaders to rekindle talks on the Union Treaty, it was becoming increasingly clear that neither Yeltsin nor other leaders would settle for the treaty they would have signed had there not been a coup. Yeltsin, riding a surge of popular support, was no fool.
He would try to use the momentum of his victory to gain more political and economic power for himself and for all the other republics.
The treaty draft, agreed to by Russia and 8 other republics, would give substantial power to republic leaders, like Yeltsin, but not enough, sources say, to prevent another coup from the center. That's why Yeltsin has called for a Russian army and defense ministry. The Ukraine is following suit. Many predict that Mikhail Gorbachev will soon be a titular head of a loose confederation of strong, independent republics. The coup only sped up the process.
Of course, Yeltsin, not Gorbachev, is the real winner.
Meanwhile, there's a flurry of changing portfolios here, Anne. We mentioned Alexander Besmyatnik resigning as foreign minister, but Boris Yeltsin just revealed a few minutes ago that the new KGB chief and defense minister would be liberal, pro-reform politicians. Those appointments were certainly made by Mikhail Gorbachev himself and will make him very happy. Anne?
All right, thank you very much, Jim Maceda, reporting live from Moscow. Well, Jim McLeshevsky is in Kennebunkport with some reaction to what's happening with Besmyatnik. What can you tell us there, Jim?
Well, this morning, Ann, U.S. officials don't appear to be particularly surprised or disappointed at Besmyatnik's resignation this morning. They say that his conduct during the coup was somewhat questionable and that his explanation for his conduct later was less than convincing. U.S. officials expect political upheaval to continue in Moscow. They say there will be a day of reckoning for a number of officials, and today was the day of reckoning for Alexander Besmyatnik. I can tell you that one other official that the U.S. would like to see leave is Mikhail Moiseyev, who is the new military chief in the Soviet Union. They say that his conduct during the coup was suspicious. President Bush says, look, it's none of our business. That's up to Mikhail Gorbachev. But they are watching very closely what Mikhail Gorbachev does, who stays, who goes, because it speaks volumes about who is Mikhail Gorbachev at this point and where he intends to lead the Soviet Union.
Yes, that's true. What about this thing about Moiseyev, however? I mean, I understand that Colin Powell is quoted as saying at least he's a guy we can work with.
Yeah, but the administration has never been happy with Moiseyev's performance. He's the person who they credit with cheating on the Conventional Arms Treaty, dragging his feet on START, and again, they didn't like the way he acted during the coup. But again, President Bush won't say so publicly. He's keeping hands off, says that's up to Mikhail Gorbachev.
All right, thank you very much, Jim McLeshevsky reporting live. Well, tens of thousands of Russians celebrated their victory last night with fireworks and music. They also tore down another symbol of their repressive past. Bob Abernathy reports.
Shouting down with the KGB, the demonstrators marched on the hated secret police headquarters with no fear of expressing their fury. As their celebration lit the sky, the people began to demolish the statue of the founder of the modern secret police here, Felix Dzerzhinsky.
We want to kill this memorial. We don't want to have this anymore.
With training demonstrations and guided tours of its museum, the KGB had tried to improve its image, claiming its notorious cells no longer were used for political prisoners, only for criminals. But then the head of the KGB, Vladimir Khrushchev, became one of the leaders of this week's attempted coup. He's now under arrest, and KGB officers denounce his role.
The KGB was involved in the coup,
only at the very highest level. In my view, it was the silliest thing to do for the former chairman.
Last night, Moscow city officials sent in heavy equipment to help the crowd finish its demolition. Now it's generally agreed here the task is to go beyond the symbols and try to reform the KGB itself. Bob Abernethy, NBC News, Moscow.
Back in this country, a standoff at the Talladega Federal Prison in Alabama continues for a third day today. Cuban inmates are holding 10 correction officers hostage and are threatening to kill them if their demand to stay in this country are not.
Was me, as Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev appeared at the Russian parliament and announced a virtual power sharing of government with Boris Yeltsin, president of the Russian Federation. Gorbachev then appointed several key Yeltsin backers to top positions in the new Soviet government. It was a political triumph for Yeltsin, whose courageous opposition to the attempted coup has catapulted him to prominence and power. Now, you may remember that Barbara interviewed Yeltsin in Russia earlier this year and saw some of the qualities that came to the fore these last few days.
Well, what happened was that this week we took a look at that interview and we were all amazed at how prophetic Yeltsin was. It was as if he had known everything that came to pass. He all but predicted Gorbachev's problems and gave an outline of what he thought would be the future of the Soviet Union, much of which is becoming reality. We also had the opportunity of getting to know the man himself a bit better. So tonight we will show you that interview with many sections not seen before. One thing is clear. Boris Yeltsin had a sense all along of the remarkable role he's playing. Most Americans realized the full power of this man when he stood atop a tank outside the Russian parliament this week. It seems that Boris Yeltsin almost single-handedly put down the coup in the Soviet Union. It is ironic that in the past, Yeltsin, the man who had been Gorbachev's most severe critic, was the one who, with a few key aides and thousands of supporters, finally forced the coup leaders to quit. Yeltsin saved Gorbachev. And after the tanks had gone back to their barracks and the coup was over, it was Gorbachev who recognized that it was his old arch-enemy who had saved him.
And the outstanding role of the president of Russia, Mr. Yeltsin.
Yeltsin was born a peasant, trained as an engineer, and rose to become a Communist Party boss. But he became disillusioned with the party, and Gorbachev forced him out of government. Yeltsin fought back to power. So much so that in June at the White House, President George Bush had embraced him. But in the past, the U.S. had not taken him seriously. Still, even before this week's attempted coup, Yeltsin was the most popular politician in the Soviet Union. The building that houses the parliament, the Supreme Soviet of Russia, is called the White House. It was from this building that Boris Yeltsin fought back the coup. It was here just last January that I talked with Mr. Yeltsin and asked him what state his country was in. Mr. Yeltsin, how would you describe the conditions in your country today? Crisis, catastrophe, on the verge of civil war? What?
Кризис, да?
Crisis? Yes.
Грань гражданской войны.
Verge of civil war? Yes. It has not yet reached the state of a catastrophe.
But it did. Last Monday, as we saw, when hardline politicians, military men, and KGB officials launched their attempted coup during Gorbachev's August vacation. Tanks rolled through the streets of Moscow, and it appeared that the Gorbachev experiment of 6 years was over. But one man stared down the coup leaders, Boris Yeltsin, who foresaw the serious threats to his country months before. What is the one thing, if there is one thing, that frightens you most about your country today?
Это мощное наступление на демократию.
It's a large-scale attack against democracy. And this escalation could move further and engulf Russia and other republics.
You said that Mr. Gorbachev did everything too timidly and too late. What should he have done?
When he started these things, he didn't make a forecast of what he was going to end up with. He relied on intuition and was not consistent. If he was under great pressure from the left wing, he did one thing, and then he was under pressure from the right wing, and he did another thing. And this inconsistency has brought about the consequences that we have now.
Do you see yourself as the successor to Mr. Gorbachev? Is this the position that you want?
Я бы хотел, чтобы...
What I want is this. I want him to regain his right senses. I want him to get back on the road of democracy and abandon his attempts to grab absolute power. I want him to admit that the sovereignty of republics is an historical inevitability.
Чтобы он признался...
This is the best alternative. And I would concentrate on the problems of Russia.
Many believe that the coup had been timed to prevent Yeltsin and other republic leaders from signing a new treaty, which would have drastically reduced the power of the central government, the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The tiny Baltic states are demanding independence, and the 4 other largest republics are also striving for greater freedom from a central authority in Moscow. It was Boris Yeltsin who had led their fight.
4 республики.
The 4 republics, Russia, the Ukraine, Belarusia, and Kazakhstan, will unite and set up a union. And the presidents of the republics or states will rotate to head the union. There will not be a single dictator. No one person presiding over these developments. A democratic form of government with a maximum of sovereignty for each republic.
Do you want complete independence of the Baltic states?
If they want it, yes. No violence. Not at all.
Mr. Gorbachev has said that if each republic is independent, that it would be the death of the Soviet Union. What would happen to the Soviet Union per se if each of you have independence, and how far would that independence go?
Европа не распалась, когда...
Europe did not disintegrate when the European Parliament came into existence. Every state in Europe is prospering. The same in this situation. Every republic, every state has its own sovereignty, its independent domestic and foreign policy. Yes, the army should be for the whole country. The railroads should be for the whole country. Perhaps communications, too. Perhaps power engineering, coupled with nuclear power engineering. But that's all. And 60-odd ministries are not necessary. Not in Russia, anyway.
Is that not then the end of the Soviet Union as we know it?
Нет, это будет союз.
No, this is going to be a union, but not with the same global vertical center pin that is very rigid. This will be a horizontal union. A horizontal union of sovereign republics with a small center entity.
Would Mr. Gorbachev be the head of this small entity?
Well, if he holds his post for the foreseeable future, he will remain the president of the country.
Народ все-таки сейчас очень озлоблен.
People have been very embittered. 6 years of perestroika have brought about a situation where poverty has become even worse. Life has become worse. The economy has been deteriorating. Changes in the government. Everything is apparently designed to create the impression that something is being done to improve the situation. But this is the outer shell, and inside nothing is happening. No changes are taking place.
Look ahead. If you could do what you wanted, would you see this country being a democracy?
Конечно. Yes, of course. Communism, no.
Is communism now dead?
Я об этом говорил несколько раз.
I have said that on several occasions, when I was in the United States of America, too. I have been saying that for at least 3 years.
I want to talk a bit about you, because you are not as well known, of course, as Mr. Gorbachev, but people are beginning to know you. Tell us a bit about yourself. What motivates you? What inspires you?
Yes, I understand what you mean. As to whether I'm prominent or not prominent, this is the Western point of view. But as to anybody's prominence in this country, you should look at the rating of our politicians, the rating based on public opinion polls. Now, I think you're blinded to certain things. You see only the personality of Gorbachev and an aura around him. An appropriate euphoria has built up around him. You don't see the developments taking place inside the country. You don't see the process of republics attaining sovereignty. You don't see this, and this will be a major mistake by the United States if they don't see this process.
Mr. Yeltsin, the title of your autobiography is Against the Grain. Have you always been against the grain?
Последние
It is true that over the past 4 years, I have spoken against the government.
часто возражаю.
But I believe that there should be a person close to the center figure with an opinion of his own and with the courage to speak out his mind. If, however, that person selects people who always say yes, this will have undesirable consequences.
Undesirable consequences, like the men who launched the military assault. They were all personally selected by Gorbachev. They were his yes men. As for Yeltsin, American officials had originally brushed him off. During his first visit to the U.S. 2 years ago, they said he was a bore and drank too much. I must ask you something that is a rather sensitive subject. When you were visiting America, there were reports that you drank too much. The reports were conflicting, but the rumor lingers. Do you drink too much?
Нет.
No.
Да, по праздникам, да.
Yes, on holidays. Yes, sometimes when I meet my friends from my college days, but otherwise, no. And I believe that even judging by the way I look, you can see that it's true.
Mr. Yeltsin, on a personal level, you write of your, the terrible state that you were in when Mr. Gorbachev forced you out of the government in 1987. But you had what amounted to a nervous breakdown. You have a heart condition. And you say, I quote, "Every time I am slandered, I am terribly distressed and I suffer." If history or society puts you at the head of this country, can so sensitive a man take that kind of position?
Да, это мой недостаток.
Yes, this is one of my weak points, but this is a weak point of a politician and not a human being. Yes, I take everything close to my heart, particularly slander. And it's difficult for me, but I believe no matter how hard it can be, it is what you feel with your heart, with your soul. It's better to be this way rather than a politician without a soul.
Interesting glimpse. You know, Yeltsin is such a hero now that if he's to share power with Gorbachev as a Soviet leader, couldn't that blunt his contention that there should be no central hierarchy?
Well, yes. I mean, first of all, I must say that I find his personality enormously engaging, that kind of strength and bluntness, very different from Gorbachev, who's much smoother. Right now, it's a very uneasy partnership. Gorbachev still hasn't rejected communism. As Yeltsin points out, the problems remain. Which one of them is going to solve them? I mean, today it's euphoria. Tomorrow, the reality sets in.
Fascinating to watch. Thank you, Barbara. Incidentally, last week it was announced that there would be a reprise of Barbara's popular interview with General Norman Schwarzkopf that would have been on tonight. Now,
and sports director John Cavazos.
Good evening, everyone. Topping our news tonight, farmers staged protests.
Yeltsin stood in front of the KGB building to announce key appointments he'd squeezed out of Gorbachev. Pro-democracy men to head up the KGB, Interior Ministry, and Defense. And in the Baltic, in Tallinn, Estonia, the statue of Lenin came toppling down, a symbol of the rapid decline of communism and Gorbachev's authority.
Still got enormous economic problems. They're sorting out their internal problems. So we will stay in touch. We will watch it. We will not interfere.
Administration officials insist there will be no economic aid to the Soviet Union until solid reforms are actually in place. But at this rate, that may come sooner than anyone expected. Sandy Gilmore, NBC News.
Yeltsin today reached a historic agreement allowing each man to assume the other's duties in case of an emergency. This week's failed coup has led to an unprecedented level of cooperation between the two leaders who were formerly arch rivals. In another historic development, Yeltsin today signed an order suspending the Communist Party from operating in the Russian Republic. 2 other Soviet republics have banned the party.
Infidelity sorts of things.
I suppose.
Only music was going on. Well, tell me about being an architect.
Sorry, miss, don't understand the question.
How good are you?
Good enough to make a reasonable living. They'll never do a South-like show about me.
That's not what I mean.
Life comes first. Work comes second. I'm not prepared to bleed onto my drawing board. I know my limitations and my priorities.
Bleeding's not compulsory.
For Schmertnick's news today, he had just been fired.
Actually, you're the first one to know abroad about it, and Ted Koppel is somewhere around, and he was the first man whom I talked about the situation.
And what a story he tells, that he was ordered early this week by the men who overthrew Gorbachev to send a communication to Washington.
It was terrible document. It was the start, if it was sent or published, it would be the start of a new Cold War.
Only a few weeks ago, Schmertnick and Baker were still crafting a new world order with Presidents Gorbachev and Bush at the Moscow summit. On Wednesday night, as Gorbachev flew back into Moscow after the coup had collapsed, Schmertnick was among those welcoming him back. Tonight, he's out of a job, suspected of collaborating with those who tried to seize power at the beginning of the week.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Moscow, Ted Koppel.
We have a bizarre story to tell you tonight, and I'll be bringing it to you in a somewhat unconventional fashion. How this story unfolded is almost as intriguing as the event itself. Because of the time difference between Moscow and New York, we work through the nights here, putting Nightline on live early in the morning. I just got into bed after last night's broadcast. About an hour later, I got a call that Soviet Foreign Minister Alexander Schmertnick would talk to me if I could come to his office immediately. We expected an interesting story, but nothing terribly dramatic, reassurance perhaps that U.S.-Soviet relations were still on track. But Schmertnick wanted to talk privately with me before we began the interview. He led me into his office, showed me pictures of his wife and 7-month-old son, and then out of the blue he said that Gorbachev had called him a couple of hours earlier and asked for his resignation. He had just briefed his deputies. Now he wanted to get his own version of the story on the record. Tonight, we'll bring you highlights of the videotape we recorded in Schmertnick's office. Mr. Foreign Minister, is it still appropriate, in fact, to call you Mr. Foreign Minister?
Well, maybe not so. I have just had a telephone conversation with my president, and he informed me that he believes I was quite passive during the 3 last days of the emergency situation. So we discussed my position, and I have resigned, and because this is not true at all. And I was not given any information which that conclusion is based. Unfortunately, it's not the best way to do it, but I would like to tell you the story as it was, because you are the first person whom I meet after the telephone conversations, besides my deputies and my chiefs of the departments, whom I have immediately informed about the telephone conversation with the president. And since I agreed to meet you today, when we saw each other last night at the presidential press conference, I thought that I will be talking on something else in this conference with you, but life is bringing us a lot of unexpected surprises.
Full of surprises.
So that's the story.
I want to get into all the details of this, but first, since you just came out of a meeting with your deputies and the members of your staff, give me your own personal feeling. This, for a man who has risen to such a distinguished post, this must be a very difficult moment for you.
It is a difficult moment, but, you know, as I have said, I was seasoned in difficult situations. Diplomat's life is not an easy one. I'm a professional diplomat. I've spent dozens of years in this profession. And I have always served the country and the people. And I always believe that the perestroika policy, the policy of new thinking, is my policy because I was always the part of the team that worked it out. It's just the situation of today, which brings so much confusion, a lot of emotions, misjudgments, probably is the reason for the decision which is being taken by the president. But I understand him. He's in a shock. He is now advised by someone around him, and he's suspicious. His best friends, Yazov and Krichkov, have betrayed him. So I understand the man. I just want the world to know, and my colleagues in the world to know, I am the man I always was. And as for the particulars of these tragic 3 days, I'll be prepared to discuss them with you so that you should know what terrible life you're going through when you were here.
Remember now, Beshmertnik was fired today because he was accused of being too passive during the coup. He has publicly insisted, in fact, that he was home, too ill to work. He still insists he was sick, but he also claims that he fought what amounts to a rearguard action to protect U.S.-Soviet relations.
My assistant brought a paper we received from the committee, which was called something like the Emergency Committee Statement on President Bush's declarations. It was a terrible, terrible document. It was the start, if it was sent or published, it would be a start of a new Cold War.
Why? What did it say?
Oh, it was an angry paper saying that President Bush is interfering and he's dictating us, and he is not, he does not understand, he never understood us, and he will never understand us, and we don't need this kind of relationship, and the previous relations were not so good because the Soviet part too much submitted itself to American pressures, but no more, just stop it, and that kind of stuff. And I knew that I was doing a dangerous thing, but I have written on that paper. Completely unacceptable.
It was during a brief break that I asked Beshmertnik whether he'd called Secretary of State Baker yet. Beshmertnik instructed an aide to place the call to Washington. When we come back, we'll show you how the U.S. Secretary of State learned that the Soviet foreign minister had been fired.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by CERTA.
It begins at dawn. They've come for you. And they want what you have. It's your bed. You're CERTA Perfect Sleeper.
The last few years to witnessing unprecedented scenes involving once unapproachable Soviet officials. But think about it for a moment. Here this afternoon was the Soviet foreign minister, revealing to the world that he had just been fired by calling in an American reporter, and then inviting that reporter to bear witness with a camera crew as he informed the U.S. Secretary of State.
Hello, Jim. Good morning. Is it an early morning there?
I'm sorry, I hope I haven't waken you up. Jim, it's a very important piece of information for me, but I think it will be also for you. I have just resigned, and I wanted you to be the first among the foreign ministers to know about it. I just want you to know, since we don't have probably much time to discuss it, but I would like you to know that I have been, I am, and I will be always the man of perestroika and new thinking policy. And I have been protecting and pursuing it all the time. And it is just because of this commotion and confusion in our capital in the afterwards of the coup d'etat that things happen that, in my view, should not have happened. But anyway, I was blamed for being passive during the last 3 days, although out of those 3 days, 2 days I was sick. But anyway, that was the case against me, and it is impossible in this situation to continue the duty. And the president, I had a talk with the president, and the president shall probably be declaring that somewhat later. Actually, you're the first one to know abroad about it, and Ted Koppel is somewhere around, and he was the first man whom I talked about the situation, since I have promised him yesterday to meet today. Jim, we shall be maintaining the friendship and contacts, and I'll be trying to be active in foreign policy and to help to continue the cooperation with the United States and with this administration and with you personally.
Even without hearing Secretary Baker's side of the conversation, you could sense that there wasn't a great deal to be said on the Washington end of the line. Beshmertnik and Baker may still be friends, but the power relationship is gone.
Yeah, please do that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. And my best regards to Susan. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
What did Baker say? Please, maybe if you would just stay there for a moment.
Well, he thanked me very much for calling and informing him about that. He regrets very much that has happened, and he values what we have been doing together in foreign policy, and he has always been thinking about me as a man of perestroika and new thinking, and that's true. And he asked me to be in touch, and he said that he will report to the president. If I agree, I said, please do that. And of course, he sent his best regards from Susan to me and to Marina, and I said the same to him. And yes, and he also mentioned about this Middle East. He said, but it's what's going to happen to that? And I said, well, I think I shall be helping, if you heard that, I shall be helping the men the best I can to pursue the policy, and I think that what we have been doing is very good. So that's the thrust of what we have just.
Were you, throughout the 3 days, were you in touch with Baker?
Yes, I talked, no, we had a talk only once. That was, I think that was Wednesday afternoon.
When we come back, Beshmertnik the loyal foreign minister or Beshmertnik the collaborator?
Okay, what would you say if you knew Stouffer's and Stouffer's Lean Cuisine had over 40 items for about $2? 40 items! Delicious values from Stouffer's and Stouffer's Lean Cuisine.
It's a car born of intelligent engineering. It's 100,000 ideas fused into one. It's powerful, smooth, refined. It's a driver's side airbag and anti-lock brakes. Introducing the all-new 88 Royale LS. Oldsmobile, come see the power of intelligent engineering.
Dear Thompson's, midway through waterproofing, I ran out of Thompson's water seal and finished with another brand. Then it rained. You could see the difference. Thompson's worked. The other side looked like I hadn't used a thing. Nothing tops Thompson's. Sincerely, Marcia Jackalone.
When you consider safety, consider Subaru. Subaru is the only automobile company that offers four-wheel drive in every make and model for every driving condition. At Twin City Subaru, we have a great selection of four-wheel drives in stock.
Safety is important to me. I need to feel secure when I'm in my car. And with so many different driving conditions here in Vermont, my Subaru gives me that safe, secure feeling.
Come see us on Route 2 in Montpelier. We're Twin City Subaru, where the customer's needs come first.
Now, you can own the car of your dreams at bargain basement prices. Government-seized vehicles as low as $100. Fords, BMWs, Mercedes, Corvettes, and Chevys, plus four-wheel drives, trucks, vans, boats, and airplanes. Also, thousands of other items seized in narcotics raids. Where these auctions and sales are, which are seldom widely advertised, how to bid in person or by mail is revealed in a fantastic tape message. Call this free information hotline within the next 10 minutes.
514-361-9696. That's 514-361-9696.
Good night, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go.
It's factory authorized clearance time again.
Well, it's time to go.
When your Dodge dealer has to say goodbye to his 91 Dodges, big total savings, even no extra charge air on select Caravans. But hurry, before your Dodge dealer says goodnight to 91 savings forever.
Good night, sweetheart. Good night.
See your local participating Dodge dealer today.
When news matters, it matters where you get your news. ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Following his talk with Secretary Baker, Alexander Bashmertnik and I resumed our conversation. For most of his professional life, he has been a career diplomat in the Soviet Foreign Service. Bashmertnik has always been a highly regarded professional, here and abroad. But now there is a dark cloud over his career. Did he, during the critical hours of the coup early this week, betray his president? The just-fired foreign minister was eager to give his version of events. Let's go back to Sunday.
Yes.
Sunday, as you know, they sent the delegation down to the Crimea to meet with President Gorbachev and placed him under house arrest. Did you know?
I knew nothing about it. I learned about it only from the president's press conference yesterday. But I knew something else about the Sunday. I was vacationing in Belarusia, on one of the lakes in Belarusia, and then they received a call to come to Moscow for an emergency discussion. I didn't know what was the subject, but it sounded so serious that I thought, well, you know, some terrible crisis is emerging somewhere, or maybe a great case of espionage or anything. The matter is so delicate that the foreign minister should be brought from his vacation to the capital. So I was brought to Moscow. That was almost midnight. I was in my jeans and casual dress. I just wanted to go to my home to change, but my assistant who met me at the port said, "You were asked to come directly to the Kremlin."
This was Sunday?
That was Sunday night. That was midnight already. And when I came to the Kremlin, I still didn't suspect what is going to happen, to be there and what's going to happen. I was directed to a large room, and there was a long table and a lot of people sitting there, generals and all, military uniforms, and Khrushchev, and Pavlov, someone else. So I sit next to the last one and I was waiting for the explanation, what was the subject that they're going to discuss with me. So Khrushchev said, "I would like to have a talk with you." And he brought me to the next room. And he said, "Listen, the situation..."
Let me just explain to our audience, Mr. Khrushchev is the former chairman of the KGB.
And he said, "Listen, the situation in the country is terrible. The chaotic situation emerges. Like it's crisis is dangerous. People are disappointed. Something should be done, and we decided to do something through emergency measures. And we have established a committee, emergency committee, and we would like it to be the part of it. I said, is that committee arranged by the instructions of the president? He said, no, he's incapable of functioning now. He's laying flat in Dacha. I said, how about the medical report about his state? He said, we don't have it now. And I said, Mr. Krichkov, I'm not going to be the part of that committee, and I categorically reject any participation in that. So we walked out of the room, and Krichkov said, Besmertnych refused. And someone said, well, we needed a liberal in the committee, you know, just for, I understand they wanted to have a kind of balanced membership. So I told them, even there, what you are doing will bring a terrible blow to the Soviet Union and its foreign policy situation. It's going to be isolated. There will be sanctions. There will be embargoes. There will be no grain. There will be no food. That will be the situation. But, well, they said, well, they don't help us anyway. The people were not very listening. I think they have, everything was decided already by the China camp.
Whatever Besmertnych did or did not do behind the scenes, he neither resigned, nor did he publicly criticize his colleagues who had seized power. I began to press him about some of the inconsistencies in his version of events. But you weren't under any illusions that the story about Gorbachev's illness was true.
You know, I was, maybe for a day or a day and a half, I was expecting a document, because I told him, where is the document? He said, it is coming. Yes, it is coming, because he's really seriously ill. And I have been waiting to Tuesday, and on Tuesday it was clear that it's not coming.
Did it not occur to you to get in touch with Gorbachev directly?
Yes, we tried. On Monday, we tried to get in touch with Gorbachev. Then we found that it's impossible.
Mr. Besmertnych, you knew, hell, the whole world knew that Gorbachev had been overthrown, and yet you elected to stay here.
You know, it's one of those things, the loyalty to your business, which is the foreign policy. If we resign, as I have suggested to all of us, let us resign. Who will take over the foreign policy apparatus, foreign ministry? Emergency committee, KGB, the military general? And we decided, just the small group of us, to do everything to protect the foreign policy, whatever happens. Because this is a time of hardship and testing. We've got to protect what we are assigned to do. If you're assigned to protect something precious, you've got to do it, not to run away, just because it's politically advisable.
When you spoke to Gorbachev a couple of hours ago,
yeah,
did you try to explain that to him?
I tried to explain to him yesterday. I met him yesterday, and I didn't go public on this matters before I talked with the president. This is my professional part. You know, people might have said, why didn't you go public and make interviews? And I just can't do it without first talking to the president. So I explained to the president what I have just told you. And he listened carefully, and I thought he understood it, and he was all right. And now we should go on working and go on give the instructions to the ambassadors.
Besmertnich's account is clearly self-serving, but it may also be true. What is indisputably true is that Moscow these days is a place of political infighting, finger-pointing, and even a certain degree of witch-hunting. Alexander Besmertnych discusses the increasingly nasty political climate here when we come back.
This is not the airport.
Of
get some directions. We'll get coffee. Road to the airport. Airplane. Airplane.
We'll never get coffee in Sweet and Low.
Ah, Sweet and Low.
Great! 2 coffees.
Coffee. Coffee? In the cup.
Sweet and Low. In 62 countries around the world, there's just no equal.
Who guarantees overnight air delivery on Saturday to more people coast to coast?
Morning. UPS on Saturday?
Who did you think?
Thank you.
Why put up with glasses that just don't fit? LensCrafters has so many ways to fit your snug points. Like snug fit pads that flex to comfortably hug your nose. LensCrafters, better fit for greater comfort. In about an hour.
It's Sears Labor Day paint sale, and your chance to save $3 a gallon on 2 Weatherbeater exterior paints. Weatherbeater Premium Satin or Flat Finish. Sale ends Saturday, September 7th at Sears.
Hey, Mr. Dalthorpe, your graphites are here.
Who guarantees overnight air delivery on Saturday to more people coast to coast?
Thank you.
Who did you think?
UPS on Saturday?
If Canadians are a vital part of your business, or if your business has room to grow with Canadian customers, there are more than 1 million reasons to advertise on WVNY TV 22 instead of local radio and newspaper. WVNY is seen by over 1 million viewers each week in Montreal, and WVNY is Montreal's exclusive ABC television station. If you're serious about the growth of your business, call the sales department at WVNY. Remember, there are over 1 million reasons for you to advertise on TV 22.
Coming up on Friday the 13th, the series.
Don't make me go back, Desmond.
40 years ago, he created a box office beauty, but he's discovered a way to keep her young forever.
I wonder if Lily Lead is still alive. Last I heard, she was an invalid, I think.
Now a cursed film, an obsessed director,
I thought you killed her.
and a new script that calls for murder.
Desmond loves me.
The Femme Fatale, coming up on Friday the 13th, the series.
Friday the 13th, Saturday night at 11:15 on TV 22.
Tonight.
What's happening in Moscow right now is both exhilarating and dangerous. The landscape is becoming littered with broken symbols of the past and scenes of radical change. I asked Mr. Besmertnik about something that happened in Moscow this morning that would have been beyond imagination even a few weeks ago.
Today, here in Moscow, there was a story this morning that crowds, I don't know how large, a storm is too strong a word, but they tried to break into the KGB offices this morning. You heard about that?
Yes, I heard it.
It almost sounds like the kind of thing that was going on in Bucharest, in East Germany, with the Stasi. Is there that kind of a sense in the Soviet Union today that the people now just want to tear down the past, get rid of it? Are you afraid that the Soviet Union may be swinging too far to the left now?
No, I think that that is a natural reaction by people against the coup d'etat and against that junta, which was actually arranged with the KGB. And they have emotionally reacted to that. There were a lot of sentiments against the KGB before, of course, because of the previous practices, etc. And this emergency situation has actually climaxed that reaction. So I can explain only by that the people are so angry, they're so desperate. There is one guarantee that does exist for not having a repetition of this kind of things now. And now I am not only hopeful, but I'm confident now. Things are not going to happen this way anymore in the Soviet Union, because the democratic thinking, the democracy itself, the changed mentality of the public has produced such deep roots that it can't just withdraw them. People are different. They may be not on the left, but they are different. They understand that they can live only in a lawful and legalistic society based on the good laws and constitution, and they can live only with a system that protects those laws, because otherwise they will come again to any kind of situation.
Are you afraid of a sort of Soviet-style McCarthy era, that now perhaps people are going to be going around doing loyalty checks? Was he against the revolutionary group? Was he against the junta? Did he declare himself soon enough? That can be very damaging to a country.
Yes, I think we shall have maybe a little bit of that leftist McCarthyism. Because of the enthusiasm of the people who maybe the people who were on the barricades. Now they ask everyone, where you were for during those 3 days? Were you on the barricades? And if you are not on the barricades, there's something suspicious. Who are you? So there will probably be a witch hunt for a while, but then it will come down, because people will realize you can't divide the country. Now is the time for the consent, for the consensus and consent. We've got to unite all the democratic forces. And the democratic forces are not only those who had the chance and, let's say, the happiness to be on the barricades. The democratic forces are everywhere. And they should not be suspected, because they worked quietly in the newspaper offices, they worked in the factories, they worked in the foreign ministry. By the way, some of our several foreign ministry people were on the barricade. So you've got to think about the unity. Now we see a tremendous attempt to clean the scene and to remove the people and to install new ones. I'm not against changing the guards. I'm only for changing the guards with the better ones. So many mistakes will be made. Many new people will be coming, maybe not all of them worthy of it. But this is a natural part of any revolution. This is really another revolution now. We have destroyed the plot, we have overcome, came to the freedom of new life. So that may happen.
When we come back, I'll have a brief interview that I conducted today with Mikhail Gorbachev. And we'll hear Alexander Besmertnik's thoughts on his former boss and how isolated he is becoming.
One use of STP fuel injector cleaner helps remove clogging deposits, and that should be of passing interest to a lot of drivers. STP fuel injector cleaner.
From now on, from this day forward, America will know what it's saving by using MCI. Just look up at any of our billboards around the country. $900 a minute, $54,000 an hour, $1.3 million a day. Which brings up a question. Why would anyone anywhere not switch to MCI?
I'm alive, Jeff Hashimoto.
I'm alive, Vonda Williamson.
I'm alive, Sonia Schofield.
I'm alive, Howard Weber.
Want to get more out of life?
I'm alive, Jessica Weber.
Get airbags. See your Allstate agent for a list of cars with airbags.
We're alive.
One use of STP fuel injector cleaner helps remove clogging deposits, and that should be of passing interest to a lot of drivers. STP fuel injector cleaner.
Now, you can own the car of your dreams at bargain basement prices. Government seized vehicles as low as $100. Fords, BMWs, Mercedes, Corvettes, and Chevys, plus four-wheel drives, trucks, vans, boats, and airplanes. Also, thousands of other items seized in narcotics raids. where these auctions and sales are, which are seldom widely advertised, how to bid in person or by mail is revealed in a fantastic tape message. Call this free information hotline within the next 10 minutes.
514-361-9696. That's 514-361-9696.
A dying planet hangs on the brink of destruction.
Even if I find the solution, you will not accept it?
And the only man who can save it is sentenced to die.
The man is supposed to kill himself. Now, you don't just let that happen.
Now, Picard must risk war to keep him alive.
Our ships have been ordered to open fire.
They expect Tennyson to die!
Death sentence on the next exciting episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Saturday night at 7 on TV 22.
Over these last few months, several of Mikhail Gorbachev's closest advisors, reformers and hardliners, have either left on their own or were trampled by this week's events. Alexander Bashmertnik worries that Gorbachev is becoming increasingly isolated.
Let me try a theory out on you. Some of Boris Yeltsin's people the other night were saying to me when we were over at the Federation building, before it was completely over, they said, when this thing is over, we are going to want a coalition government. And indeed, one of his top aides said to me, I said, how would that work? He said, well, if, for example, Gorbachev picks the head of the KGB, we'll pick the head of the defense ministry, and one and then the other. Do you have a feeling that perhaps Yeltsin's people are behind the request for your resignation so that they can sort of clear the deck and decide who's going to be the new foreign minister?
I just don't know. I don't know who is behind it, who was... but there was a campaign, as I said yesterday's newspapers, and there was some yesterday. It was an arranged and definitely orchestrated campaign against the foreign ministry. It was always the most choicest place in the government. So probably the people would like to take over it. But who is going to be? Whether it's going to be Gorbachev's men or Russian Federation men, we shall see. To me, it's not important. To me, the most important thing is the professionalism, dedication to the work, honesty, the ability to believe in the policy you follow, and that anyone who is going to take that office we have been just in, they should continue the policy of new thinking, because this is really the only policy which is good for the Soviet people and for the national interest of the USSR. This is my complete belief.
You're too much of a professional to express anger publicly. But are you hurt that President Gorbachev has asked for your resignation?
Well, I'm disappointed. Of course, for me, it's not an easy situation, but Gorbachev actually has lost one of his loyal supporters.
He's lost a lot of his loyal. I mean, he's lost Yakovlev, he's lost Shevardnadze, he's lost Bashmertnik, and then on the other side, he's lost Khrushchev, he's lost Yazov. Who's left?
I don't know. I'm very much... yesterday, Yakovlev said a very interesting thing. He said, much would depend who will surround Gorbachev now. It may be, again, the group of yes men, subservient people who would create a bunch of, I don't know how to translate it into English, a bunch of some non-compoops around him. So much will depend on that. Who is going to be around Gorbachev now? Because some of his best friends betrayed him. Some of his best friends are being removed. So I don't know. We shall see. I hope he will now pay much more attention to that, to the people who are around him, and he should not be rushy in personnel affairs. I know how it is done in the United States, and unfortunately it's not done that way. Here it may be done on the spur of the moment. But anyway, I wish good luck to President Gorbachev. I shall be supporting him all the way, in any capacity I am, because he is the man who embodies the best of our perestroika and the best of our hopes. He is the best man of the political scene. He is the man who created this policy, and he needs that support. And I shall be doing it for him in any capacity, I mean, very, very honestly and with all my heart.
Mr. Bushmetnik, I thank you. It's been an extraordinary time to be here with you, and you're very, very gracious to have spent so much time with me.
Thank you.
There are some who believe that this week is already bearing witness to the beginnings of a second coup against Gorbachev. That Boris Yeltsin and his supporters in the Russian Republic forced Gorbachev to call on all his ministers to resign today so that they can be replaced with Yeltsin loyalists. For the moment, though, Gorbachev still insists that his program is on track.
We just sat down and talked about urgent measures to be taken. We talked for several hours about economic measures that need to be taken immediately, measures of a social character. And naturally, I confirm our course not only concerning the reforms in this country, but also in foreign policy. It's the democratic forces that are functioning today.
There are no longer any tanks rolling through the streets of Moscow. The barricades are down. The crowds have dispersed. But the struggle for power in this city and in this country continues. I'll be back in a moment.
Your pets go many places during the course of a day, and you can't always protect them when they go into flea and tick-infested areas. We can. Used as directed, Heart's Blockade for dogs and cats repels and kills fleas and ticks, including ticks that carry Lyme disease. By creating a barrier, Heart's Blockade prevents these pests from living on your pets. Helping to improve your pet's quality of life is your responsibility. Helping you do that is Heart's.
Frequently, it is life that stretches our sense of the incredible, while an editorial cartoon, by comparison, seems relatively clear and sane. Renan Lurie gives us his latest perception of Mikhail Gorbachev. On Sunday, Secretary of State Baker will be David Brinkley's guest on This Week with David Brinkley. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Moscow. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a video cassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98 plus $3.95 shipping and handling.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
America's watching ABC.
Now, you can own the car of your dreams at bargain basement prices. Government seized vehicles as low as $100. Fords, BMWs, Mercedes, Corvettes, and Chevys.
Of Gorbachev's actions reached Kenny Bunkport, President Bush refused comment until he got them straight.
I heard one report I got on the 9th hole, and another one I got on the 11th on the same matter.
National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft kept the president briefed. And when word finally came, the White House reacted with restraint. In a written statement, the White House welcomed the news as another step forward in the reform process. But privately, U.S. officials are elated. They believe it means the Soviet Communist Party is dead. The State Department's #2 man administered last rites.
Clearly, the Communist Party in the Soviet Union is bankrupt as an institution. It isn't going to be there any longer. That's clear.
U.S. officials also believe Gorbachev's announcement may remove the last ideological barrier to reforms in the Soviet Union, including independence for the Baltics.
I would be surprised if they aren't free within the next 6 months.
All this puts increasing pressure on President Bush to come up with economic aid for the Soviets. But Bush is resisting.
Before that, we've got to see reforms in the Soviet Union. We got to know who we're dealing with in these ministries. There's just a lot of things that have to happen before we can move forward.
U.S. officials are calling this the Soviet Revolution of 1917 all over again, but in reverse. As for Gorbachev, they have two words. It's over. Garrett?
Jim Matuszewski and Kenny Bunkport, thank you. Continuing on the subject of aid for the Russians, former Soviet Foreign Minister Edward Shevardnadze today called on the West to send help quickly to his nation. He said that whatever happens politically there, the Soviet economy is in such bad shape that the coming harsh winter will be, in his words, very difficult. So, what can we in the West do? What should we do to help the Soviet Union? Well, Britain and France today said more economic aid should be sent right away, but as we just heard, the president said new aid must wait until the Soviet Union makes basic changes in the way it runs its economy. Our chief economics correspondent Irving R. Levine reports that that's a view also shared by at least one key Democrat.
In an economy where 40% of the fruits and vegetables rot before they get to market, where people are not paid based upon productivity, where there is no banking system or pricing mechanism, I think you're just throwing good money after bad.
With the main opponents of reform now out of the way, Gorbachev must make three major reforms to justify U.S. aid. Reform number one, end government control of the economy. Although Boris Yeltsin and now today Gorbachev himself are sweeping away Communist Party control, the economy still is run by government ministries.
They need now to bury Lenin entirely, and that means essentially to get the government out of the economy.
Well, what we're talking about is vast ministries in Moscow which issued directives to factories way off in the Ukraine, Belarus, and so forth to produce detailed specifications for machine tools, tractors, semiconductors, and so forth. And none of this works.
Reform number two, transfer state-owned farmland into private hands.
You'd see a dramatic increase in the production of agricultural goods. And you'd see people in the countryside making money.
And most important of all, reform number three, make the ruble exchangeable with other currencies. Essential to attract foreign business, but a tough step because it would make the ruble saved by Russians virtually worthless.
It's dramatic. A lot of people will be losers. The economy will gain. But it would have an effect almost within a month to introduce a real money in the Soviet Union.
Even if the Soviets now agree to these reforms, there's another problem. With the Bush administration cutting aid to cities and states, where does it get the money to help the Soviets? Irving R. Levine, NBC News, Washington.
And we'll have more news as we continue in just one moment.
Last year, thousands of people got rid of their old refrigerator to buy the Maytag refrigerator with a guarantee to the year 2000. Now, the rest of you have a chance. Buy one, and if it stops working before the year 2000, we'll buy it back. See a Maytag dealer for details.
I want to ask you the question that many are asking right now. Is this the reform process we're still seeing underway being carried out, or is this the new revolution?
Oh, it is definitely a revolution. Reforms destabilized the situation, destroyed the old order, made revolution possible, and then Gorbachev, I think, really lost touch with reality. His government went out of control. There was a coup attempt. Now it is free for all.
Well, Gorbachev has now given up one of his two positions of power in the Communist Party, such as it was. He is still president of the Soviet Union. But does he have any power in that position?
In order to be an effective president, one needs a government. And Gorbachev does not have a government. And those whom he is appointing are people recommended by Yeltsin. Gorbachev today has a ceremonial position. He's trying to regain political momentum, but at this point there is no question Boris Yeltsin is in the driver's seat.
Well, there's another report that came over the wires this evening showing just who is in the driver's seat, Mr. Symes. It was announced that the Russian Federation, headed by Yeltsin, is now taking over control of all government communications, including secret communications, because there is no effective Soviet government. Is this something that Yeltsin is going to give up easily, this power?
Boris Yeltsin is acting very much like he's in charge of the Soviet Union, not just of the Russian Republic. He's trying to staff the central government with his own people, and the way he allows Gorbachev to keep some of his people, he tells the Russian government more or less to take responsibility away from the center. It is a very uncertain situation. It is based on personalities rather than laws. It is a revolution.
All right. Now, Yeltsin has already recognized the independence of the three Baltic republics, small states. But the giant Ukraine, more than 50 million people, the parliament there today voted for its independence. Is Yeltsin going to allow that to happen?
Well, he is not in a position not to allow. He doesn't have an army which would invade Ukraine. And Yeltsin made it very clear that he wants the republics to have their way, but then he'll be prepared to use economic pressure to persuade them to come back. If you want to have independence, accept responsibility, and no free lunches. What concerns me greatly is that there are 11 million Russians in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, in Crimea, in coal mines, and many of these people don't want to leave the Soviet Union. They don't want to separate themselves from Russia. So there is a potential for turmoil somewhat similar to what is happening in Croatia between the Serbians and the Croatians.
Finally, sir, you were born in the Soviet Union. If you ever wanted to go back there to live one day, do you think there would be a Soviet Union in the future for you to go back to and live in?
There is no Soviet Union. It was an empire based on force, coercion, and totalitarian controls. That empire is dead and is now being buried.
Dmitry Symes in Washington, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
And we'll have more news as we continue in just one moment.
If you love your pet, watch this. We'll prove that you can keep fleas and ticks off your dog or cat with Hart's Blockade. Fleas are all over this untreated lab dish. We've sprayed the left side of this dish with Hart's Blockade, while the right side remains untreated. Watch how Blockade repels the fleas. They literally jump to the untreated side. Ticks normally want to crawl to the top, as they do in this untreated tube. See how the Blockade...
Stand up to the tanks. But how many actually do and did this past week? Well, Boris Yeltsin did, of course. So did the young men who died resisting the tanks. So did several thousand others. But then there are the others, the millions who may rejoice today in what has happened, but watched it happening from the sidelines. The fact is, revolutions are rarely the work of the masses, although they definitely need their support. They are the work of a few determined people with a strong leader and a clear idea of what they want, where they're headed. Lenin showed that in 1917 when he and a relative handful of Bolsheviks brought the Communist Party to power. Yeltsin is showing it now as he drives communism from power. There is something appropriate in that. There is also definitely something ironic. And now, as we said at the outset of our report, the party in the Soviet Union is finally over. And that is our look at our world this day. Join us tomorrow morning for Sunday Today, as well as Meet the Press, as we continue to follow the events in the Soviet Union. I'm Garrett Guthrie. Good night for all of us at NBC News.
Tonight, the Golden Girls make your dreams come true.
I wish men would have breasts, just for one day.
Well, we can't do that, but we do.
Serving oil can help reduce fuel consumption. It can also reduce traffic. Motorcraft quality parts. Peace of mind from Ford.
Good morning. I'm Charles Kuralt, and this is Sunday Morning. Last week, the Russian people decided that after 74 years of the Communist Party, they have had enough. A hardline coup d'etat planned by a few old men behind closed doors was rejected by hundreds of thousands of ordinary people in the streets, and the world watched a coup denied. Betsy Aaron will report our Sunday morning cover story.
For Americans, the television pictures coming from the Soviet Union this week were always fascinating, sometimes frightening, and finally exhilarating. But for a Russian family in Maryland, those pictures were personal. The people in those pictures were family and friends. Later on Sunday morning, we'll watch those pictures with Soviet author Tatiana Tolstaya.
We will also hear from Tom Fenton in Moscow, where yesterday Mikhail Gorbachev himself resigned his position in the Communist Party and dissolved the once all-powerful Central Committee, saying that it had supported the actions of criminals. President Bush is probably as dazzled by all this news as the rest of us are. We'll ask Wyatt Andrews in Maine with Mr. Bush for the president's reaction. And other things. Did you know pianist Richard Good is recording every one of the Beethoven sonatas? Charles Osgood will tell us about that. And we will hear some good Beethoven. History Recovered is an affecting story from Bruce Morton.
All through the 1920s and 30s and 40s, a photographer named Paul Buchanan left this house and wandered these North Carolina mountain counties, taking pictures of the people who lived and worked here. Now another photographer has found some of his old negatives and printed them, giving us back that record. Later on Sunday morning, a look at this piece of the American past that was lost, but now is found.
John Leonard will take stock of George C. Scott's performance in a new television movie. We'll go to the circus, the old-fashioned 5-ring tent circus, and watch the big top go up. We'll have a look at the sports news, the weather forecast, and we'll choose a milepost for the historic week gone by. First, here are the headlines for Sunday morning, the 25th of August. Surprising news seems to come from Moscow every hour now. There was a mysterious suicide overnight. President Gorbachev's personal arms control and military advisor, Marshal Sergei Akhromeyev, shot himself to death. Akhromeyev had no known role in the coup. Only recently he said the army would never try to overthrow Gorbachev. He said the generals are devoted to the growing democratic process. So this news from Moscow this morning, like so much from over there lately, is a mystery. President Gorbachev's spokesman confirmed today that Raisa Gorbachev is not feeling too well, to use his words. The spokesman did not give any details, but he denied rumors Mrs. Gorbachev had a heart attack during the coup attempt. He said she's resting at home. Germany asked the 12-country European community today to formally recognize the independence of the 3 Soviet Baltic republics, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. Norway and Denmark say they will establish full diplomatic relations with the Baltic countries as soon as possible.
My glasses seem to hate me, and I've got the marks to prove it.
Why put up with glasses that just don't fit? Lens Crafters brings you better fit, greater comfort. Lens Crafters glasses fit your snug points with Snug Fit temples, Snug Fit flex pads, and Snug Fit flex hinges. Why put up with glasses that just don't fit?
I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
Lens Crafters, better fit, greater comfort.
Has the biggest lead this morning. The Minnesota, the Yankees scored 3 runs in the 6th inning to take the lead for good. The Blue Jays have lost 11 of their last 16. In the meantime, the Tigers were hitting home runs, as they've been doing all season. Against Seattle this time, that one by Skeeter Barnes. This one by Cecil Fielder, his league-leading 36th home run of the season. The Detroit Tigers have won 5 straight games and a share of first place. Who'd have dreamed such a thing when the season started? Relentless is the word for the summer heat in the middle of the country today. The temperature will rise into the 90s or above again today, all the way from the California Sierra to the Mississippi River. Much more moderate high temperatures for today on the 2 coasts. The West Coast will have pleasant, dry weather today. So will the East Coast, north of Virginia. The Southwest will be unusually muggy and hazy, and it's likely that some thunderstorms will develop in Arizona and New Mexico this afternoon. There may be some thunderstorms in the northern plains and northern Great Lakes. There certainly will be showers and thunder showers in the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, and northern Florida. And tomorrow, the heat wave in the middle of the country will persist and push a little eastward, bringing storms to the eastern Great Lakes tomorrow. And tomorrow, the southeast will be just like today, stormy and showery. Another pleasant day for the northeast tomorrow before the weather turns showery on Tuesday. Symbols can have powerful meaning in the lives of human beings. Think of the cross and the Star of David. Think of the Statue of Liberty and the Stars and Stripes. For 70 years, there has been a symbol of such power that it made the world tremble. The hammer and sickle of Bolshevik Russia, emblazoned on the flag of the Soviet Union, signified a vast nation bent on conquest and an ideology based on fear. Everybody understood that the hammer and sickle were not tools. They were weapons. Under this symbol occurred purges and murders and show trials and executions, territorial expansion by force of arms, and monstrous crimes of every category. Really, the workers and peasants didn't ever own the hammer and sickle. This symbol always belonged to a highly centralized and disciplined revolutionary elite who became old men who did not notice in their arrogance that the world had passed them by. Last week, the old men hauled out the hammer and sickle and tried to terrorize the people one more time. This time, the people laughed at them. The new flag of Russia will be the old one, the tricolor designed by Peter the Great. Last week, the Russians put this one in the trash bin of history.
This portion of Sunday morning.
It's on television, but this morning it does appear that the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is as dead as a dodo bird. We'll turn to Tom Fenton in Moscow, who has been watching the events of this week at close hand, and ask him if he agrees. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Charles. Well, you're dead right. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union is history. And believe me, I can find no other words to describe it than it's the biggest story since World War II. I stood here last night on this roof looking out over the Kremlin. The red flag was flying. The crowds of Muscovites were standing outside Lenin's tomb in Red Square, and just a few hundred yards away, inside the walls of the Kremlin, they were killing Lenin's party. And at first, I thought, how wonderful. And then the thought came to me, how sad that after endless, untold suffering and misery, millions dead in purges and famines and trillions spent in the Cold War, it took so long to figure out that the system just doesn't work.
There are still a lot of communists, presumably in the Soviet Union, tens of thousands who owe their jobs to that vast bureaucracy. What's going to happen to them all?
Well, millions. I mean, we've talked to some of them. This morning we were at a neighborhood regional communist headquarters on the edge of Moscow. Some of the offices are sealed. There are padlocks on the doors. The files have been sealed. Good question. You've got all of these people who will have no place to go on Monday morning. They're the fat cats, the ones that had the good jobs. They're the ones that had the good apartments. We talked to a sergeant at the door, and he was delighted. Police sergeant, absolutely delighted. He said they were the ones that had everything, and they tried to keep us happy with sausage. It's going to be an immense problem, Charles, because the Communist Party was like an octopus, and its tentacles reached out to the far corners of Siberia, to the Pacific coast. It controlled just about every aspect of life in this country. Somehow, they're going to have to learn to get along without it. At the moment, in effect, this is going to be a partyless country, not even a one-party country, a country without parties. There are plenty of nascent political parties, including monarchists and various Christian parties. They'll presumably be a communist party eventually, although it's been banned and outlawed. Can you imagine the Soviet Union banning communist activity and the KGB banning communist activity in the army? Nobody knows the answers to all these questions. There's just one great, big, huge question mark facing us now in this huge country.
One of the question marks is, of course, Gorbachev. George Kennan said last week he thinks Gorbachev has exhausted all he has to give to the situation in Russia.
That is the opinion of just about every Soviet citizen that I've talked to in the last few days. All of them give him a tip of the hat. They all say he's the one who made it possible for us. He's done an immense service to this country, and the biggest service he could do now would be to go, but not go immediately, to take his time. They're looking for an orderly transfer of power. He will certainly go down in history as one of the great figures of the 20th century, but he has nothing more to give this country. When he came back after the coup, when everyone in this country was absolutely, totally disgusted and fed up with the Communist Party, and Gorbachev announced that he was still a dedicated communist, and what the party really needed was just a little more tinkering, somehow he could make it all work. He's just totally out of touch.
You used the word orderly, but that, I guess, may be just what the Soviet Union isn't going to be for a while. This morning, the Republic of Moldavia declared its independence. It really does appear that the Baltic states are going to gain genuine independence now. It has the seeds of a dangerous situation, hasn't it, Tom?
Well, on the one hand, the empire is crumbling, no question about it. The biggest blow was the Ukraine yesterday. The parliament voted for independence subject to a referendum. That's 50 million people. That's the industrial and agricultural heartland. A lot of the republics will fall away, but that leaves Russia, which is huge, immense. It stretches all the way out to the Pacific. It's a gigantic country. There hasn't been the sort of agitation that you would expect. Surprisingly, the Soviets, I used to say the Soviets are sheep. How could they put up with this for 70 years? Well, they've done something now, but the people have done it in a very orderly way. One thing that encourages me is the young people. And I've talked to a lot of those this week. They just seem to have the right ideas. Basically democratic, generous impulses, tolerant. Many have said, well, we should have a communist party. There's some people who believe in that. That's the future of the country. I think in their hands, this country will be safe. It's just that the transition is going to be awful. The economy is in such terrible shape. People are going to have to go through tremendous suffering, and no one, not even Yeltsin, has told them the price that they're going to have to pay.
Tom Fenton, bringing his insight and wisdom to a historic week. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome, Charles.
And this morning, as Tom Fenton was just telling us from Moscow, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union is thrashing about in its death agony. We all watched it happen from a distance, but for some who watched it here in the United States, the events were very close to home. Betsy Aaron reports our Sunday morning cover story.
This is a CBS News special report.
The official Soviet news agency TASS says that Soviet Vice President Gennady Ganayev has taken over as President of the Soviet Union.
What does it mean, took over? In what sense? Maybe I don't understand what it means.
Reportedly because President Mikhail Gorbachev is in poor health. So once again, Soviet Vice President Gennady Ganayev is reported to have taken over as President of the Soviet Union.
And that was that, and then there were other news. So I waited for a while, and in 5 minutes they said that there was a sort of coup. They didn't call it coup, I think, first.
Whether that struggle will turn violent is now up to the Soviet army.
She is Tatiana Tolstaya, a Tolstoy, a descendant of Leo Tolstoy. She's living in Towson, Maryland, with her family. Tatiana is an author. Her husband, Andre, teaches classics at Johns Hopkins.
The Army demonstrating its support for the coup led by hardliners that pushed Soviet President Gorbachev from power.
I just cannot drop it. I watch, and then I see people with kids walking just in the midst of these tanks. And, well, it's crazy, of course, but I can see that it's sort of peaceful.
So far, the state of emergency, at least in Moscow, has been a friendly standoff.
Is it harder to be here? Do you want to be there with your family?
For others, standing didn't go far enough.
I didn't realize that it's actually happening. It never happened during my life. So when it takes place at in this corner of this room. It takes place on a screen. And I cannot realize that it really is taking place there, that the streets I see are the streets I know.
The president of the Russian Republic climbed onto a tank outside his office building to denounce what he called a reactionary coup.
Tatiana's been trying to call her father in Leningrad from the moment the news of the coup was broadcast. She's had no luck.
Your call cannot be completed at this time in the country you are calling. Please try your call later.
Sunday Morning visited her father, Nikita, in December of last year. He is a reflective man. At 74, he spoke of the Tsars, the Russian Revolution, Stalin, the years of told and untold tortures.
We sometimes ask ourselves, it's not a very serious question, it's kind of sentimental question. Did we indeed deserve everything that happened with us? What were our mortal sins as a people, as a nation? By all the things were produced that made so much suffering.
But Nikita has lived to become a member of the Russian parliament, Yeltsin's parliament. And his son, Tatiana's brother, is also a member of that parliament. Tatiana has been worried about her father and her brother's safety as they join with Yeltsin to throw out the old system. She was with her family in the Soviet Union just 10 days ago.
The men who deposed Gorbachev tried to be matter-of-fact.
These guys that organized this coup, they were saying openly that we are going to do that. We are going to do that.
To save our country.
To save our country, to oust Gorbachev. He's so bad. He's, well, I don't know, a traitor of our socialist beliefs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
You must have talked about this with your father.
Well, with everyone. It's just, you know, the very first moment you enter a Soviet apartment of your friends or someone, you sit down, drink coffee, and start discussing all that.
Rumors of a move against Gorbachev have circulated for months, but they did not prepare the people for today's armored reality.
So in this household, the events of Monday, while shocking, were not necessarily surprising.
His weapons were perestroika, overhauling the economy, and glasnost, letting some fresh air into a closed society.
Gorbachev, a man Tatiana knows personally, is a disappointment to her. Did you trust him? Did you think?
I don't know, because he's a kind of mysterious person. He remains mysterious for me. After all these years and after all these things, because there is something in his personality. He's so energetic. He's so self-reassured. He's such a good actor. People who know him well, they say that he can change his masks or whatever it is quickly, immediately, in a second.
Уважаемые товарищи, дамы и господа,
He himself put all these people into power. Yenaev is his choice. Yazov is his choice. Pugo is his choice. Everyone is his choice.
Mikhail Gorbachev is now on location. He's undergoing...
This junta wants to have a strong Soviet Union, and they are naive enough to think that it's possible. It's no longer strong. It's very, very weak as an empire.
Is it even a union anymore?
What is dangerous in all this thing is that the country may stay without some established leader. Whether Gorbachev is good or not, we got used to him, and if he's suddenly removed, then in this hole, a lot of dirty water may come. And some people that are much worse than these 8 old trembling people, they have trembling hands, especially Yenaev.
И поэтому я считаю, что сейчас перед нами стоит 3 очень важных задачи. Первое – это продовольствие.
Where is your heart?
My heart is there, but it doesn't mean that life is possible for me there. It's a very strange condition. I'm not a very patriotic person. I just happen to love that country because I'm used to it. and because it's interesting, and because it's mysterious.
Molotov cocktails fly as hardline troops tackle the barricades outside the Russian parliament. Will the new day bring more confrontation?
Tuesday night, the news was grim.
What does it do to you to see the flames and the tanks?
Wow, it has sort of a quality of unreal still. It's sort of like a nightmare, a bad dream. I still can't believe.
It's daylight now in Moscow. The night was filled with confusion, gunfire, and death. There were killings in the streets near the Russian parliament.
At least 3 coup resistors reported dead.
I sort of have the habit of always imagining the worst so that it would not happen, but sometimes it does.
As we speak, more heavy armored units are moving into the center of Moscow. Now, clearly, all the heavy stuff is on the army side, and if they wish to use it, they could take over the Parliament building. The question is whether they wish to inflict large
Your call cannot be completed at this time in the country you are calling. Please try your call
No,
later.
it's interrupted again. Oh, no. The call cannot be completed.
It was about midnight Moscow time, just an hour after the newly decreed curfew had gone into effect, when a group of Soviet light tanks loyal to the new hardline government began pushing through barricades near the U.S. Embassy and only a few blocks from the Russian Parliament building.
Just because it has such an unreal quality, I have a sort of feeling that it will all end in 1 or 2 days.
It was, in the end, a day of conflicting signals. And everyone agreed the next 24 hours could well decide who will run this country.
While Tatiana was sleeping, the coup was crumbling.
TASS, the official news agency, is now reporting, just a few minutes ago, that the emergency committee has been disbanded and that all the emergency regulations that it had promulgated have now been removed. That, in effect, is the official end of the coup.
Do you believe it?
Well, yes. Why shouldn't I? I believe it from the start.
I think it is safe to say that the situation appears somewhat more positive than in the earliest hours of this coup.
Bye-bye.
Did you believe last night when we talked that this?
I don't know what to think actually, because it all sounds like a novel, literature.
Boris Yeltsin welcomed back Mikhail Gorbachev today, but the Russian president now clearly controls the country.
You are a writer. What this looks like is that the coup is a prologue to a very big story. The coup is not a story in itself.
No, it's just an event in a very long story, in a very long Russian story.
The people took over Moscow today. They went from one institution to another, demanding the expulsion of communism.
The new Russian flag has already invaded the airspace over the Kremlin. The statue of the KGB's founder disappeared from its pedestal.
An unconfirmed report, the Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev, will quit as head of the Communist Party.
Marching very slowly and very somberly to put to rest 3 people who are now being considered heroes.
I mean, events have moved so fast that I'm reluctant to jump to conclusions. We can speculate in a couple of areas, though. For example, most of the strategic systems that we're most concerned about are located in the Russian Republic. They appear to be, at this point, clearly under control of the central government. What will ultimately happen as we see a devolution of power and authority away from the central government out to the republics, to those strategic systems, is not yet determined. With respect to conventional forces, very real possibility that we will see some of the republics develop their own conventional forces. Those don't constitute any kind of a threat to the United States.
You've got another category of weapons to be concerned about. Those are tactical nuclear weapons, for example, bombs, artillery shells, and so forth, that aren't a strategic threat to the United States, but that obviously are important to control. Now, the Soviet government that we've dealt with in the past has always evidenced great concern and understanding about the legitimate concern we have about who controls those systems. They recognize they have a major responsibility in this area, and they've dealt with it accordingly. But at this point, the question of who's going to control the Soviet armed forces in the future, I think, is an evolutionary one, and we'll have to await developments.
Cheney, let me ask you to take off your secretary's hat and just be one of the senior people in this administration for a moment. This morning, Germany has announced that it is going to recognize the Baltic states. The Scandinavian countries have already done so today. Clearly, all over Europe, there is going to be a rush to recognize those states, and regardless of what Moscow does. Now, is the United States going to be the last country to recognize the Baltic republics?
I'm not sure what you mean by the last country to recognize the Baltic republics. We've never recognized the incorporation of the Baltic republics.
To send an ambassador to Riga.
50 years. Well, I think that's basically a question of formality at this point. I only expect it to be a relatively short period of time until there will be recognition of the independence of the Baltic republics.
By the United States.
They've still got some issues to sort out, obviously, internally. The Russian Republic has now recognized the independence of the Baltics. The Baltics have claimed independence, and they've still got Soviet troops on their soil. They do not, at this point, control their own borders. So there's still a number of mechanical questions that need to be sorted out. But I think it's just a matter of time until the Baltic republics will, as they should be independent states.
One other question, if I may. Do you think that, as many analysts and some people on the Hill are saying, that the moment is now here for us to make a grand gesture toward the people of Russia, the Russian people, whether it's money, food, or something to signify our approval? Is it time to stop worrying about the technical economic concerns, or is it not?
I would state it somewhat differently than that, Johnny. I would say that the United States clearly has an interest in helping the forces of reform inside the Soviet Union, that the events of the last week have cleared away a lot of the political underbrush in terms of our ability to be able to do that. But they're still well short of the set of circumstances economically where we can do more than we already have. I think we're clearly going to be deeply involved in providing technical assistance. I would expect, for example, that we will reschedule my Deputy Don Atwood's trip to the Soviet Union to talk about industrial conversion. You'll see a lot of work in food distribution programs and other ways.
How about food supplies?
I think if there are major humanitarian needs this winter in the Soviet Union, that we probably would be prepared to help.
Mr. Secretary, coming back to predictions, a few years ago you predicted that there was a high likelihood that Gorbachev could be thrown out of power one day, that some new leader would emerge who would be more hostile to the United States. Well, certainly Gorbachev's power is being weakened these days before our eyes, and yet Yeltsin does not seem to be hostile to the West, he's quite friendly, in fact. Do you stand corrected?
Well, I guess you could say I was right up to about last Monday, Gary. But clearly, when I made my prediction 2.5 years ago, a lot of things had not yet transpired. I am delighted with the outcome. I think it would appear at this point that what we now have in the Soviet Union is someone who's far more friendly to our principles and shares our goals and objectives of democracy and demilitarization of the Soviet Union in Yeltsin than were involved in my original prediction. So I'd say yes, my original prediction was inaccurate.
Well, if this is so, and if the direction of the Soviet Union is so positive, the military forces have been so weakened, is it not time in this country to have a basic reassessment of not only our attitude towards the Soviet Union, but also our military, our defense spending policies, that even larger cuts will be possible in the future because of this changed world?
First of all, I think you have to look at what we've already done. The fact of the matter is we now have in place a program that's going to take us by the mid-90s down to the lowest level of defense spending in over 50 years. We'll be spending less on defense as a percentage of GNP, percentage of the budget, than we were spending at any time since before Pearl Harbor. That's already in the works based on the changes we've seen. We've also recently been through a major war in the Gulf where we had to deploy 500,000 people halfway around the world and fight a major conflict that had absolutely nothing to do with the Soviets. So to say that there is not going to be a need for continued military power in the future, I think would be inaccurate.
Nobody is saying that.
No, and we do have massive reductions underway, 25% reduction in overall force structure. So I'd be very reluctant at this point to run out and make a judgment that we can now dramatically cut below what we're already planning to cut, which is substantial.
But you don't see the possibility down the road that you'll need to take a second look at this at some point
Well, I think we'll take a look at it probably on an annual basis to make certain that we can, in fact, continue on that course and do so safely.
Mr. Secretary, did I hear you saying that you think we're better off with Boris Yeltsin in there than Mikhail Gorbachev? Because that's the way I read what your implications were.
I think it's clearly my view, Bob, that Boris Yeltsin at this point represents a set of principles and values that are synonymous with those that we hold for the Soviet Union. Democratization, demilitarization, and I think that's not surprising to anybody.
So do you think he will cut the military forces?
I think he will.
Very short, very quick question, Mr. Secretary. Do you think that Boris Yeltsin can clean this problem up any better than Mikhail Gorbachev could?
I think a couple of points. First of all, I share the euphoria everyone else feels at the events of the last week. It's a phenomenal week in the history of the world. Secondly, there are enormous problems ahead. Third, Yeltsin, by virtue of the fact that he's been elected, has legitimacy that's derived from the consent of the governed. That's an enormously important point. And I think that he probably will be in a very strong position now to move forward with economic reform by virtue of the fact that he does represent the people of Russia.
Secretary Cheney, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning here on Meet the Press. In a moment, Bob Novak, Johnny Apple, and I will be back with some personal observations.
To you, this may be just a bushel of corn. But to us at the Archer Daniels Midland Company, it's enough pure golden corn oil to make 2 pounds of margarine. It's also enough protein meal to raise 3 chickens. We even capture the surplus heat generated during processing and use it to accelerate the hydroponic growth of fresh vegetables. From what's left, we distill 2.5 gallons of ethanol, used to make cleaner-burning, high-octane gasoline to help improve the environment. So you see, we get both food and fuel from each bushel of corn. One more reason why ADM is known as Supermarket to the World.
Back now, Meet the Press. Johnny and Bob listening to Secretary of Defense Cheney. It's obviously that reassessments are starting right now towards the Soviet Union, economic aids, possibly shipping food there, recognizing the Baltic states. What do you see happening, Johnny?
Well, I think the West is going to make a decision or begin a decision at the meeting in London this coming week to do something much larger in an economic way than it did at the summit conference in London, which is only a few weeks ago, but which seems like a few centuries ago. They're going to have to use economics, among other things, to make a political statement. I don't know how much money will be involved, but the whole tone is going to be different.
Bob, food comes first, right?
Absolutely, and I think that Dick Cheney is way ahead of the State Department in realizing that the need for that. I think he's also ahead of the State Department and the White House in admitting that we are in much better shape with Yeltsin than with Gorbachev. And I believe that the micromanaging talk about how difficult it is overlooks the fact that finally the entire superstructure of the Bolshevik totalitarian state has been undercut.
Okay, what does this do in this country for those who've been saying we still have to have a lot of defense spending, we have to still beware of the Russian bear?
Well, as somebody who was in that league, I think it totally undercuts those arguments. Dick Cheney says he thinks Yeltsin's going to cut defense spending. I'm sure of it, and that changes the entire pressure on the United States defense apparatus.
I think that's true. I think we ought to remember that the change in the Soviet Union that we've seen so quickly, so dramatically, only masks the underlying problems. There is no precedent in history for changing from a command economy to a market economy on a scale like this. It's going to be chaotic, and it's going to last for years.
In many ways, the hard part starts right now.
But it's better than we had before.
Indeed it is.
Johnny, thanks for being with us today. Well, this past week has been filled with moments and images that will stick in the mind for a long, long time. There was Boris Yeltsin on top of a tank in Moscow defying the coup. Yeltsin pointing his finger at Gorbachev in the Russian legislature before a worldwide television audience, dictating to him what to do. What we're seeing here is one of the rare examples of a dominant and domineering personality finding the support of the people at a particular moment in history. At its worst, that has led to a Hitler. At its best, it could mean Yeltsin leading a true democratic revolution. Boris Yeltsin certainly knows how to acquire power. He has shown us that. But will he know how to use it? Perhaps there's a lesson from his youth. In his book with the revealing title, Against the Grain, he writes of the day as a teenager he and some friends found a small army grenade in a field. Yeltsin said he could take it apart. He tried, and he failed. Then, impatient, he tried to take it apart with a hammer. The grenade went off, costing Yeltsin parts of his fingers. He had neglected to remove the fuse first. Perhaps Boris Yeltsin recalled that event this week as he defused Mikhail Gorbachev. Now he and the other republics seeking their independence hope they can take apart the Soviet Union. I'm Garrett Gutley. We'll have a wrap-up of the day's developments in the Soviet Union tonight on NBC Nightly News. And join us again next week for Sunday Today and Meet the Press.
It really does appear that the Baltic states are going to be recognized by a number of European countries. What's the president's stand on U.S. recognition of those little countries?
Charlie, that's where this story definitely goes next. The pressure has got to be increasing on the president to turn his attention to that. You know, the United States, for 45 years, has prided itself on being the nation that never recognized the Baltics as part of the Soviet Union, but even in the almost 3 years that he's been president, and despite the changes going on in the Soviet Union before, the president has not been willing to take that next step toward recognizing the Baltics as independent. The argument has always been, don't, for example, put any pressure on Gorbachev. Don't get him in trouble with his conservative flank. Don't do anything that might destabilize the Soviet Union. Absolutely all that is going away now, Charles, and you add to that the fact that Boris Yeltsin, the man the U.S. sees as the new power broker, has himself come out for Baltic independence. Mr. Bush, in this last week, has said that one of the things the U.S. can do in its wait-and-see attitude is lend moral support. It's going to be hard for the president to fend off questions now. What else is he waiting for? What other opportunities is he looking for?
And speaking of support, what about the question of direct aid to the Soviet Union now that things have changed so much? Right. Of course, the president's always said, I want to see some reform before we send aid. Chancellor Kohl and others are saying, if you want to see reform, you better send some aid.
Well, you figured the issue exactly, Charles. What happens this Thursday in London, for example? Western specialists from the industrialized nations will get together in London to talk about Soviet aid. And there seems to be a consensus to accelerate what's called technical assistance. Well, technical assistance is a code word for expert advice to the Soviets. How to computerize, how to democratize their institutions, how to increase the productivity in their farms and their factories, how to get the oil out of the ground, for example. There seems to be a consensus there. You can also probably count on the Western allies to assure the Soviets that they won't starve this winter, that there can be some humanitarian assistance expected. On the other hand, the tricky question is cash and loan. Should you give the Soviets cash? Should you loan them money on favorable terms through the IMF? The president is still of a mind that says that is like throwing money into the ocean. And there is pressure on him to do something about that. On the other hand, what I suspect is part of what we have seen in this last week of wait-and-see policy by the administration is that he is using this question of cash and increased aid as a form of pressure on Gorbachev. That pressure being, wake up now, Mikhail Gorbachev, embrace reforms, give up the party, and to some extent, that's the president's game, and he's trying to send this message to Gorbachev that slowly, it seems, only slowly, Gorbachev is getting.
Gorbachev may not be the man to be sending messages to anymore. What about that?
Well, it is very hard to tell. I mean, it's remarkable when you watch these changes going on, Charlie, how the White House is literally in the same boat as almost everyone else in the world. They have no idea whether Gorbachev is going to be able to survive this. And why? One of the biggest factors comes tomorrow. Remember that the wildest of the wild cards gets played tomorrow when the Supreme Soviet, the all-Soviet Parliament reconvenes. This is a body that was elected by people in their districts. It's the body that elected Gorbachev president of the Soviet Union, but it's also quite conservative. Their leaders were part of the coup. So what kind of body is going to reconvene tomorrow? Will it be full of these elected conservatives who may want to oust Gorbachev? Will Gorbachev be able to maneuver this body so that he gets in, if you will, a democratic competition with the Russian parliament, sort of trying to out-democratize Boris Yeltsin? I think it's fair to say that the president would like to see Gorbachev stay in power. First of all, he likes him. Second of all, let's not forget, through all of this confusing story, that nuclear politics are at play here. The United States' overriding interest is in having a central government in the Soviet Union headed by somebody the U.S. trusts and who has firm control of the Army and that nuclear button. Charlie, finally, perhaps one of the administration's most powerful arguments in favor of supporting Gorbachev is that he's the man who brought all this. He made the apparatus that elected Boris Yeltsin. He eliminated the fear in the Soviet people. He's still a man the administration wants to do business with.
Finally, this question. With events happening so fast, isn't there a political danger for President Bush in being seen as moving too slow?
Yes, and we have seen this inclination in the president when the Berlin Wall fell. His reaction there was tepid. You know, again, he is the man who always likes to see, let's wait and see, let's be cautious. Obviously, in the case of the Soviet Union, as I mentioned before, the President of the United States finds himself in a position of not wanting to do anything that would destabilize the situation. Yeah. Conversely, he also is in a place, let's face it, the Cold War has ended dramatically in the events that have happened since 1989. Part of the president's thinking comes from sports, and that is the old sports adage that when your old enemy or anybody facing you in competition is busy handing you a victory, don't stand in his way. That's also a big part of the president's thinking. But events, Charles, the White House finds itself in a situation where they find it tough not just to predict events, but to react to them. Things are just moving too quickly.
Wyatt Andrews at Kennebunkport with the President. Thank you very much for getting up early and joining us. I'm Charles.
Out now, history was being made in the Soviet Union, a coup against Mikhail Gorbachev by hardline communist leaders in an attempt to stop reform in the USSR. But the history that was made was not what the coup plotters had in mind. Instead, in the space of a week, the 75-year reign of communism there appears to have collapsed.
The week culminated with Gorbachev resigning as head of the Soviet Communist Party. This just a day after he had urged the Russian parliament to reform rather than ban the party there. The founders of communism fell all over the country. In Moscow, Felix Dzerzhinsky, founder of the KGB, and Yakov Sverdlov, first head of the Soviet Union. And in Lithuania and Estonia, statues of Lenin. Other heads also fell, real ones, as Gorbachev and Russian President Boris Yeltsin, in their startling new power-sharing alliance, fired anyone in government who supported or failed to oppose the coup attempt, including the foreign minister, Alexander Besmertny.
We are in extraordinary times, and we just have to wait, see what changes are happening.
President Bush has taken a cautious stance, refusing to comment on future relations with the Soviet Union or who he thinks will be or should be leading it.
The merits of Mr. Gorbachev and his service to this country is immense, indeed is immense, but now time for him has come to realize that he should resign.
Can the United States still do business with Mikhail Gorbachev? We'll ask National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft. And we'll discuss Baltic independence and the future of the Soviet Union with Yeltsin advisor Alan Weinstein, Marshall Goldman of Harvard University, and Madeleine Albright of the Center for National Policy. Aftershocks of the Soviet coup, an issue facing the nation.
From CBS News, Washington, Face the Nation, with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer. This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world.
Corn. Not only is it America's most abundant crop, it's also the most versatile. At the Archer Daniels Midland Company, we get golden corn oil from it, as well as corn sweeteners, ethanol, and protein products used in animal feeds. Today, we're extracting even more sophisticated value-added products from corn. Products such as citric acid, which gives candies and fruit-flavored beverages their tangy flavor. And lysine, an amino acid that optimizes the nutrition of poultry and swine feeds. But even this list is far from complete. Right now, we're developing additional value-added products from corn, along with innovative applications for them. Because at ADM, we believe the potential of this crop is nearly as great as its supply. ADM, supermarket to the world.
And as we begin our broadcast, joining us from Kennebunkport, Maine, the President's National Security Advisor, General Brent Scowcroft. General, thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning, Bob.
Let me begin by asking you what the administration sees as the significance of Mr. Gorbachev's resignation yesterday as the head of the Communist Party. It's being read in this country, I suppose, as the end of communism in the Soviet Union. Does the administration view it that way, or is that judgment too hasty?
That may be too hasty. I think what it is the end of the Communist Party as the governing authority and as the sort of framework through which government was extended out to the least hamlet and village. There will still be perhaps communist parties in the various republics. There is no central governing organization anymore, and that is really dramatic.
Well, who's in charge of the Soviet Union?
Who's in charge of the Soviet Union? In a titular sense, there's no question that it is President Gorbachev. He is the constitutional head of the Soviet Union. Of course, with the dramatic events of the last week when he was incommunicado and out of it, and President Yeltsin, the president of Russia, bravely stood on a parapet and defied the coup plotters and restored the Soviet Union to constitutional government, certainly has considerably increased power and authority.
Well, now, when the president was in the Soviet Union, he made no bones about it that Mr. Gorbachev was the man that he wanted to deal with. He was courteous to Mr. Yeltsin. He went to see him. But as he left, he in effect said, Gorbachev is the man. Is that still the case? And who is the government going to deal with now? Do you deal with both of these men? Do you deal with Mr. Gorbachev first, Mr. Yeltsin second? How does it break down, General Scowcroft?
We dealt with them both before. We will deal with them both as the situation evolves. The intertwining of the Russian government with the Union government has become more intimate. Salayev, the Prime Minister of Russia, is now nominated to be Prime Minister of the Soviet Union as well. There will be a meeting tomorrow of the Union Supreme Soviet, which may sort or even further confuse the situation. But it is up to the Soviet people and their leaders to sort out themselves what the governing authority will be. But right now, there's been no formal change in the structure.
A little earlier this morning, Defense Secretary Cheney, and I'm not quoting him directly, but he said in so many words, all things being equal, he'd just as soon deal with Boris Yeltsin. Is that your view, and do you know, is that the President's view?
Well, I don't think we have, I wouldn't say we have personal preferences. We will deal with the authorities in the Soviet Union, and that is what we have all said. Now, Yeltsin is in fact an authority in the Soviet Union. The Russian Republic has assumed control over a lot of the Union activities that take place on the soil of Russia, which after all is the giant of the Republic. So it's a very confused situation, and we will deal with both.
Looking back on it, do you think that the administration was a bit slow in recognizing the power that Boris Yeltsin had? I spoke just a moment ago with someone who had been in the Soviet Union just last week who said anyone who was there before all of this took place recognized that Mr. Gorbachev's power and popularity was fading fast, and that Mr. Yeltsin was fast becoming a power there, and yet the administration stuck with Mr. Gorbachev. In retrospect, did you stick with him too long? Should you have begun to distance this country from Mr. Gorbachev and done more to encourage relations with Mr. Yeltsin, do you think, General?
Well, Bob, you're putting it back on the basis of personality again. And what I would say is that after Yeltsin became the elected president of the biggest republic in the Soviet Union, we dramatically increased our contact with him, as is appropriate. But President Gorbachev is still the legal titular head of the Soviet Union, and it is with him, in that sense, with the Union president, that the United States has diplomatic relations.
Let me ask you about something that Mr. Yeltsin said yesterday. He decreed that the Latvia and Estonia are now independent. Does that mean that, is that it? Are they now independent? Does Mr. Gorbachev have to go along with that? Will the United States now recognize that they're independent?
Well, we welcome that move, and we hope that will be followed by moves from the Union, the Soviet authorities, to do the same. As I say, there is a meeting of the Supreme Soviet tomorrow, and we do have indications that such a motion will be introduced. We think it's high time, but again, the formal grant of independence is not a matter of a declaration from Russia, but the Union authorities themselves, and we hope it will be done quickly.
Well, now, Germany, as I understand it, has already said that their government is going to recognize the independence of the Baltics. Norway and Denmark, some of the other Scandinavian states, I believe, are taking steps in that direction. Why does not the United States go ahead and say, we recognize them as being independent? I know you're going to say, well, we've never recognized they're a part of the Soviet Union, but we have never sent an ambassador there. We've never taken the measures that one would expect we would take if we truly recognize someone as independent. Now, why wouldn't it be a good idea to just go ahead and say now, as these other countries are doing, we think they're independent, and let it go at that?
Well, in a way, as you point out, Bob, in a way, we've always thought they were independent. Now, but there are certain practical...
But we haven't treated them that way, General.
Well, because they are and have been, in fact, under the control of the Soviet Union. So we've had no practical way to give impetus to that independence. Now, what we're hoping is that the Soviet Union will, in fact, make that grant, which will fundamentally change it and give effect to any independence. Right now, it is without effect.
I suppose some people would say, shouldn't we do something to sort of help that along?
We're helping all we can.
In what way?
Believe me.
How are we doing that?
We are in communication with the Soviet leadership.
General, who has control of the Soviet nuclear weapons now?
Well, that's a very sensitive question, Bob. We watched very closely during the days of the coup, and it is our judgment that there was no increase in the danger to the United States as a result of the coup. But for a time, if you remember, Gorbachev was isolated, his communications were eliminated, and there was a different leadership. So I think one can assume that actual control for a time did shift some.
There was a time, in fact, when he did not, those reports were correct then, when he did not have control of the weapons, because we were told that at one point he did not have control over what we in this country call the nuclear football, the codes that one needs to launch the weapon. Is that true?
I think we have to point out that we don't know as much about their control over nuclear weapons as we know about our own. And what I think it's just fair to say that so far as we know, that control of those weapons remained in hands that did not increase the danger to the United States.
So I take it from what you're saying that Mr. Gorbachev has control of them at this point, or does Mr. Yeltsin, or does in fact the United States know in this fast-changing situation who in fact does have control?
I'm not sure that we know in that kind of detail, but we have a fair idea.
The question of reform and aid, and that the President said over and over again he wants to see more and more reforms, is what has happened yesterday, is that viewed as major reform? Will the President now give more thought to some sort of aid to the Soviet Union, do you think?
There have been some encouraging steps. In addition to nominating Mr. Salayev as the Prime Minister of the Soviet Union, there has been a sort of an economic committee set up under him, which includes Mr. Yavlinsky, who was one of the more radical reformers, as you recall, to take over the process of economic reform. Now, there has been no change economically in the circumstances other than that the coup probably sent the economy into something of a further downward spiral. But I think that the dramatic change is that now reform can proceed apace without the drag that the conservatives pose, and therefore the kinds of things which would make increased response from the West possible ought to be able to be done more quickly.
General, just in a closing thought, we've heard all kinds of assessments. Some say that what happened this week is the most important thing that happened since World War II. Some say since the Russian Revolution itself. How do you sum up what happened this week?
Well, I would say, you know, that's just a personal judgment factor, but I would say what happened over the past week, both in the coup and the subsequent wounding of the conservative forces, the forces that have ruled the Soviet Union the past 70 years, culminating by the end of the party as a federal structure, is probably the most dramatic developments, at least since 1917.
General Scowcroft, thanks so much for being with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
Word on the street was they were a bad bet. An American institution, 3 days shy of extinction. Only one investment firm, Dean Witter, saw past the problems to the real value of the company. And a rumble was heard round Wall Street as the last American motorcycle company came roaring back to life with a listing on the New York Stock Exchange. From Main Street to Wall Street, at Dean Witter.
We measure success one investor at a time.
Each day, we make enough flour for over 40 million loaves of bread, but we're not a baker. We make enough sweeteners each day for over 90 million soft drinks, but we're not a bottler. We also produce enough protein meal each day to meet the daily requirements of 50 million head of cattle, and yet we're not a butcher either. We're the Archer Daniels Midland Company, a major link in America's food chain. Each day, our processing plants are capable of transforming 5 million bushels of grain and oilseeds into food and feed ingredients. Corn, wheat, soybeans, peanuts, sunflowers, barley, flax, sugarcane, cottonseed. At ADM, we're helping America use its agricultural abundance to feed the world. So you can understand why we look at harvest time so optimistically. After all, it's not the end of this crop. It's just begun to grow.
The best reporter in Moscow joins the best team in television to add his special touch to just about the best story we ever remember covering. 60 Minutes tonight.
Well, with us here now in Washington, three experts. We often talk about having experts on this broadcast, but we really do have three experts on the Soviet Union this morning. Alan Weinstein, who is the president of the Center for Democracy. He has worked with Boris Yeltsin during Mr. Yeltsin's visits to the United States. Marshall Goldman, who is a professor at Harvard University, and Madeleine Albright, a professor at Georgetown, and also the president of a think tank here in Washington. Let me begin by what General Scowcroft said just a moment ago. Did he say what I think he said about the nuclear weapons, that we're not sure who was in control of those weapons, Madeleine?
Well, he certainly seemed very vague about who had them, and I think that it is of some concern for all of us to know where they are. Presumably, President Gorbachev has them, but I don't think that General Scowcroft answered that as crisply as one might wish for.
I'm not certain that I could be as confident of that, Madeleine, because President Yeltsin has taken control of the secret telephone codes of the Communist Party and others, and it's unclear as to how much else he's taking control of at this point. I think we'll have to wait for further announcements from the Soviet Union before we're clear on that.
He did seem to confirm one thing that's been reported, but has not been confirmed by any administration official. That was indeed, during the time that Mr. Gorbachev was being held hostage, that someone else had the nuclear code.
Well, that's not absolutely clear. The first part Gorbachev did, but what Gorbachev said is they tried to come down and take things away from him when he was down in the Crimea. Now, the confusion is, not only did they take them, did they manage to get them, because Gorbachev kept saying he didn't want to have any contact with those people. But now in the aftermath of that, things are back in Moscow. Who's in control of the army? Is it Yeltsin? Is it Gorbachev? And is Gorbachev in charge of anything right now? So the Yeltsin is, you're right, Alan, is taken over the internal communications, but we just don't know where the rest of it
we wouldn't
goes.
be concerned whether either Gorbachev or Yeltsin has them. I think that would be safe. I think the question is whether somebody else has them, and presumably that is not so. I mean, there are not a lot of renegade generals running around.
But there's a larger issue here that may not be clear till tomorrow. Earlier today, the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Republic, Andrei Fedorov, said that the Russian Republic would call for the dissolution of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union tomorrow. Now, if that happens, remember General Scowcroft had indicated that things might get clearer once the Supreme Soviet met. They'll simply get more muddled, obviously.
Well, they are becoming more muddled. The Ukraine, for example, has declared that it wants control of all the troops that are in the Ukraine, and one after another we're going to see the Soviet army broken up into at least 15 different armies, and then the question is, to some extent, there's some centralized control, including the codes to the nuclear weaponry, and where does that reside, whether it's going to be in the Russian Republic, which is probably most likely, and that means right back to Yeltsin then.
The bottom line is the administration does not know, or if it does, it is not saying.
Well, I don't think they're being coy about it. I don't think they know, and I think there's some confusion in the Soviet Union right now as to who's on first and what kind of controls they have.
Professor Goldman, let me ask you, you are just back from a visit to the Soviet Union, which had been planned previously. You were very close by when Boris Yeltsin and Mr. Gorbachev had this extraordinary exchange the other day. What did you find out? What do you make of all this?
Well, I've been in the Soviet Union many times. I think this is probably the most exciting time that I've ever been there, to be in the same room with both Yeltsin and Gorbachev. They were not treating one another as long-lost friends. But what was most impressive to me is that now the Soviet people seem to feel that they have restored their dignity, that they've taken a stand of independence, that they know what democracy is, that instead of lying, the man in the street as well as the big brother, now they're being nice to one another, being truthful to one another, and they think that they've proven their dignity. The problem is there's going to be a morning after, and they're worried about it. What do they do tomorrow? How are they going to solve their economic problems? When this euphoria dies down, then what happens? Right now they're trying to do everything they possibly can. Get rid of the communists, get rid of the KGB, get rid of those who were involved in any way in dragging their feet. But what happens after that? That's the big issue.
Let me ask you what I asked General Scowcroft, and then perhaps I'd like to hear what both of you have to say about the same thing. Do you think that the administration was too late getting on this train, this Boris Yeltsin train? Should they have seen earlier that Mr. Gorbachev's power was fading?
I'm very critical of the administration. I think they've been getting some bad advice. It is no doubt the case. They knew, they should have known that Gorbachev's popularity and the public opinion polls in the Soviet Union on a good day would be as much as 20%, usually 10%, and sometimes below that. It was Yeltsin who had the popularity. It was Yeltsin who was carrying the public. All the time I was there last week, I never saw one sign supporting Gorbachev. They were all for Yeltsin, all get rid of the communists. And we should have known that earlier. We should have responded that earlier. And, you know, it wouldn't have stopped the revolution or the coup, but it certainly would have given us more credibility inside the country.
Professor Albright, what do you were just there and did a poll on the Soviet people and attitudes and changes. Do you agree with Professor Goldman?
Well, I do. I mean, the Times Mirror poll that we did showed that Gorbachev had the lowest job ratings of any leader that one could ask about, and that Yeltsin was very popular. But basically, I think we have a situation here now where things are getting increasingly confused rather than clearer. Marshall really talks about the Russian people. What we have seen are the people in the streets in Moscow and Leningrad. We have not really seen as many people out there, and what we found in the Times Mirror poll is that there are deep divisions in Soviet society about how to move, and the economic problems are exactly the same as they were a week ago. There's no food in the stores, and people don't know how to move. So now there is the time for the administration to stop being cautious and really move forward and engage with the Soviet Union.
Professor Weinstein, you have worked with Yeltsin. You gave them some advice when he came to this country the last time around.
Well, we helped organize this trip.
Helped organize that trip. What's your assessment of all this?
First, I think that the administration was very cautious before he was elected president. On the trip itself, they came on strong. The vice president came to a dinner that we hosted for President Yeltsin. The Congress had him in. There was still cautiousness because of Gorbachev, but things were moving very much in the right direction. The problem was, of course, they were not committing on the things that Yeltsin and Gorbachev have asked the administration and the Congress to commit on, namely aid, namely the kind of support they need. Marshall, I do think that we do know who's on first. It's Boris Yeltsin. The problem he faces, the problem they all face, is that events are moving so quickly. These are the 10 days that shook the world all over again, and we're only into day 7. And now that the whole governmental structure has unraveled, and it has unraveled, the question is whether they can stitch it back together in the days ahead before you get anarchy in the republics.
Well, what is going to happen here? These republics, Yeltsin says they're now independent in the Baltics. The Ukraine yesterday declared its own independence. Are we going to see the whole thing just come apart?
It's coming apart. Alan said we know who's in charge, but I'm not sure the administration knows who's in charge. The administration still thinks that there is a Soviet Union that's coherent. The problem is that as Yeltsin is coherent, and Yeltsin is the one that's taking over, and we were seeing one after another, the different republics break out of this union, which was really a coerced union.
Well, the Soviets know who's in charge.
They don't, and I think not to put a dark cloud on this amazing happening is I think there is danger of anarchy and division. There are very serious signs of interethnic splits. The Times Mirror poll showed that also. And also the danger of emigres coming out. I mean, we have been talking about post-euphoria in Eastern Europe where we had this similar outbreak. All of a sudden, when they see their problems, they're nervous. Now there's the possibility of these waves of Soviet citizens coming out, and we can see a lot of issues.
But what happened in the last week was something unique in the history of that country. Spontaneously, no, not just the people, spontaneously the leadership from all different sides, the Shevardnadzes, the Yakovlevs, the Sobchaks, the Popovs, all the others, rallied around.
The problem is going to be...
The question now is whether they can maintain themselves...
After the split, the economy is going to be even more chaos because the Ukraine is refusing to ship grain to the Russian Republic. That's going to make
But none of this will be possible until they get a new governing structure. And
so while there were some remarkable things and very good things that happened, this is far from over.
They've got about a day or two to put it together again.
We're out of time. And lady, thank you both, all three of you. We'll be back in a moment.
Dean Witter believed in priorities.
Know why your clients are saving. Know why they're investing.
Okay, come on, folks.
At some point, it's college. Later on, retirement. But Dean Witter knows that often the highest priorities are all the things that happen in between.
Is there anything else you want?
Just the first dance.
There are many ways to measure success.
We measure success one investor at a time.
Well, as might be expected, last week's program on the abortion issue and the protests in Wichita, Kansas generated a lot of mail. Most supported firmly one side or the other, but a few felt the issue itself was being exploited. Colonel Joseph Grant of Minnesota says that abortion has been debated for over 2,000 years. He quoted Aristotle and Hippocrates. Discussing abortion, he says, allows politicians to avoid having to discuss the major problems facing our country. He writes, "You must have noted that all hands and the ship's cat are saying that something must be done about health care, but nothing moves." And Ronald Dalkey of Colorado says he recently became pro-life. Nevertheless, he says he questions what would we pro-lifers do with another million young mouths to feed, bodies to clothe, and house. What I want, he says, is a coordinated policy toward children. If we want these kids carried to term, we'd better be prepared to take care of them. Well, if you have a thought, drop us a line. That's it for this week. I'm Bob Sheeper. Thanks for joining us on Face the Nation.
This portion of Face the Nation was sponsored by Dean Witter. There are many ways to measure success. Dean Witter measures success one investor at a time. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company, ADM, supermarket to the world.
I'm Harry Smith. The abortion battle continues in America. Operation Rescue leader Randall Terry talks about the...
Safe. They dug into their grandmother's trunks or somewhere, and out they came, all over the streets. So here's their new old flag, until this week, not seen for 74 years. So after an eventful and promising week for all of us here at ABC News, until next week, thank you.
And Yeltsin formed a coalition to replace the Soviet government. Yeltsin installed his own men to head the KGB, Defense, and Interior. Then Yeltsin suspended the Communist Party from Russia and banned it from the KGB and the military. Question, have we now entered the Yeltsin era, meaning that Mikhail Gorbachev is virtually a figurehead, Pat Buchanan?
John, what we saw this week in the Soviet Union was the birth of a nation. The nation is Russia. It has come alive out of the Soviet Union. Other new nations are going to come out of this superstructure. As for the head of the Soviet Union, Mr. Gorbachev, these crafty, deceitful, dreadful people who overthrew him, all 8 of them were appointed by him. He has no base in the populace. His strategic base in the party and KGB has been shattered. The future lies with Boris Yeltsin, the Russian people, and the independent republics of the Soviet Union.
Paul Gigot.
I agree with both those statements about Gorbachev and Yeltsin. I think one of the untold stories here is the degree to which Yeltsin played the astute, savvy politician inside the Soviet military, his allies in the military. He is escorted around the Soviet Union by the military when he ran for the Russian presidency. He had 2,000 Afghan veterans in the Russian parliament to defend him. He is carrying the day here.
Chris Matthews. This isn't the way it was supposed to work in the Gorbachev-Yeltsin partnership. As of April, they had a deal where Yeltsin would lead the people and represent the spirit of the revolution, and Gorbachev would represent the bureaucracy and the party, and he would bring them along. He was supposed to bring them along, kicking and screaming into the revolution. Well, they left him cold. I mean, imagine George Bush having his cabinet take over the government, put him under house arrest in Kennebunkport, And every single member of the bureaucracy, 3 million American workers in the government, supporting him. Not one person blew the whistle. The entire Soviet bureaucracy betrayed Gorbachev, and his only job was to lead them. I think he dropped the ball.
Eleanor,
yeah, but
good to see you, and thanks for sitting in the Mort. He went on vacation. He thought it would be a slow news week.
Well, I noticed Mort isn't here, Fred isn't here, and Jack isn't here. I figure they're in a male sensitivity training class in the Crimea.
Some people might think it's a coup.
Right. Anyway, I think what we have here now is a co-presidency between Boris Yeltsin and Mikhail Gorbachev. And Gorbachev is back. He's in a diminished state, obviously, but, I mean, he's done another Lazarus, and he's going to be around at least for the next several months. And these two guys need each other because Gorbachev is the symbol of a continued democracy, if you will. I mean, he's the Jerry Ford in this coup.
He's got to.
And Yeltsin has...
Jerry was elected.
Yeltsin has the power, and when he overturned the temporary decisions that Gorbachev made, saying that he submitted them to a collective decision, I think he makes collective decisions like John does. He collects himself, and he makes the decision.
Mikhail Gorbachev has got to wake up and smell the coffee. He is still talking about reforming the Communist Party. A reformed communist, John, is like a Catholic atheist. It can't be done. It's a contradiction in terms. He's got one role left. He ought to come in there, realize what happened, purge the KGB, purge the army, purge the party, and try to move to a new order in the Soviet Union, a new Russia.
Do you think he really missed the boat on Thursday morning when he had his news conference after having been held in detention? He should have said, I am through with the Communist Party. I renounce it. I think we should move away from it. Shouldn't he not have done that? And having not done that, is he now politically dead or dying?
Well, he's politically dead if he doesn't abandon the Communist Party. And he came back at the press conference, and he looked as if he still just doesn't get it. I mean, his allies, Yakovlev, Shevardnadze, have abandoned the party, but not Gorbachev.
Who are the winners and the losers, Chris Matthews? Big winners.
Well, clearly Boris Yeltsin is the leader of the Russian people. He's unchallenged. The president of Russia, Gorbachev, referred to him as playing a leading role. That term in communist terminology is very important, the leading role. He's replaced the Communist Party in the leading role in the Soviet Union.
Would you say that nationalism is a big winner, Pat?
Oh, I'd certainly, listen, and it's a healthy nationalism. The Baltic republics are much closer to freedom now. They stood up. Russia, which is a great country and a captive nation, is closer to freedom than it's been since World War I.
Would you say capitalism is a big winner?
Yeah, but getting this country on the road to capitalism is still an enormous task, and it's a little bit like teaching the Congress to do collective farming. I mean, this still remains to be
Big
seen.
losers, Gorby, Communist Party, KGB.
Yeah, Boris Pugo was a big loser.
By the way, you gave a prediction on Boris Pugo a few months back. You told us to keep our eye on him.
I sure did.
This is one of the few predictions you've gotten right and one of the few you didn't steal.
God, you stayed with Gorbachev too long, and it's written all over you.
The more typical loser is Alexander Besmertnik, who typifies all of the faceless bureaucrats who just hid away in the weeds. I mean, he deserves to resign or be forced out. He may still have to stand trial. He's the former foreign minister.
He's been fired.
So he's been fired. So the bureaucracy is being cleaned out by Gorbachev. Let's exit. The presidential election for the Soviet Union will be held next summer. Is Boris Yeltsin a shoo-in to succeed Mikhail Gorbachev?
John, you still don't understand. Boris Yeltsin is the president of Russia. Russia is the future. He's not going to run for president of the Soviet Union, in my view. My guess is he'll get behind Shevardnadze.
Maybe he wants to go be right out there as head of the Soviet Union to take the heat on the economy. What do you think? Is he going to run for president? And is he a shoo-in?
I think he's got the job he wants as president of Russia. I think he'll be happy to let Gorbachev or Shevardnadze or Yakovlev or one of those people.
So you don't think he's going to run for president of the Soviet Union?
I doubt it.
This gets into the framework of governance in the Soviet Union, which will probably be the collegial group called the Federation Council, which is the presidents of the 9 republics, and they will have as the individual who is going to mediate or be the interlocutor Gorbachev. But they will govern the Soviet Union of the future. Would you say that's true?
I agree, and I think Gorbachev, Yeltsin has the best job in the Soviet Union right now. He's the leader and spirit of the revolution. he's in the same position that Lech Wałęsa was in Poland, which is you don't want to take the job of governing, you want to take the job of leading the people. It's a much better job.
Lech Wałęsa eventually did take the job.
He did eventually have to take it.
And that may happen to Yeltsin, too.
Is he going to run for president of the Soviet
I don't think
Union?
so. I think everybody here is right. And I think Yakovlev, the godfather of glasnost and a close friend of Gorbachev's, may be the next president.
Do you think Yeltsin is a true statesman, or do you think he's kind of a lucky politician who happened to be in the right place at the right time?
I think along with George Bush, I underestimated Boris Yeltsin, but he really rose to the occasion this week with a sheer force of personality. He stopped those
There's something else that he did this week during all of this chaos, and that was he systematically issued a series of decrees that provided him with the stability and, if you will, the regularization of the anti-coup effort that made his success all the more estimable. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, exactly. And a lucky man does not stand up with such political choreography as standing on a tank and going to the...
There's a little warning.
Pat, then Ellen. Go ahead, Pat.
He's got what Ronald Reagan has in his situation. He is a natural, and he came out and behaved naturally as a leader, and it came through.
Quickly.
Yeah. One thing I don't like is he's shut down Pravda. Not that I'm any big fan of Pravda, but I think that is flirting with censorship. It's using the old tools, you know, to suit your purposes.
My God, can we get this notarized? You're against the shutting down of Pravda. Issue 2. Is an aborted coup better than no coup? I'll repeat that, especially for the less swift. I'm not necessarily referring to you, Chris. Is it better to have a blown coup, a botched coup, than no coup at all? I will argue yes. Reasons. Number 1, the failed coup discredited the communist anti-reformers, thus making the job of the reformers easy. 2, the Soviet military can now be purged. 3, the KGB can now be purged. 4, the bureaucrats can now be purged. Witness Foreign Minister Alexander Beshmertnik, who, quote-unquote, resigned this week. 5, the coup engaged the people of the Soviet Union in the reform process, so the revolution now no longer moves from the top down, but from the center out, which means that it cannot be stopped. 6, as a result, more Western aid will now flow. For these 6 reasons, it was better for a failed coup to have happened than for no coup at all. True or false? I don't know, Cliff.
Oh, absolutely true. I mean, this started out like a Tom Clancy novel with all the fears of a Cold War and Pat Buchanan probably saying, "I told you so," and it ends up like a Peter Sellers movie with a little putsch that couldn't, and it does. It just cleanses everything.
Making Pat look like kind of a jerk.
Yeah, and our side can say, "I told you so," right? I can't think of any negatives to it except
the
that
economic crisis in the Soviet Union is far worse. That's one negative.
Well,
another
it raises
negative
expectations that somehow that you've lanced this boil and now you can make everything's going to be wonderful, when in fact you've still got to deal with not only economic reform, but
another bad thing in the coup. Yeltsin says he has his own army. He does have his own army. How is the West going to deal with this man's army? And how are you going to, quote-unquote, divide the nuclear weapons?
John,
those smart missiles can do anything,
It's a very simple question. Is it better to see face-to-face or to see through a glass darkly? These gentlemen who are behind Mr. Gorbachev showed us the true face of communism for a change. Thuggish, bureaucratic, reactionary, no ideas, no ideals, nothing but a lust for power. It is better to see that clearly. So when these guys rose up, excuse me, I did cheer. Yep.
I agree with that, but the thing is, there is a downside here, and that's disorder, particularly in the short term. There is absolutely no loyalty in the system at all. Until this thing gets sorted out at the top with Gorbachev and Yeltsin, we're going to have an awful lot of a big mess.
It was coming to a crunch between the Democrats, Yeltsin, and Republicans, and the hardliners. Why not get it over with?
I want to say as Cusco, this was a Bo coup. Because I think for 2 reasons. First of all, the coup leaders didn't have the spine or the immorality to start killing people by the thousands. Number 2, we now know who runs Russia, the Soviet Union. What's left of it, the people. As led by Yeltsin. We've learned something. This thing's been going on now for a number of years. Who's running Russia? Now we know. The people led by Yeltsin. So we have truth, which is the only good thing that come out of any civil war.
The challenge to George Bush's leadership is not over, because I think the West has to be a partner in, if in fact they do fundamental reforms, the West can't stand by and just send over task forces headed by Alan Greenspan. I mean, I think we have to come up with some real meaningful aid.
Have you thought of the deeper problems, though? Don't you think that a resurgent powerful Russia will dominate the other republics, perhaps inclining them to return to a safe, stable communist system?
Oh,
did that occur to you?
I don't think we'll live long enough to see that, John. I don't think so.
Communism is dead as a faith for years, and now the party
All right,
is
let me ask you
shattered.
this. What plan does Yeltsin have to resolve the wheat crisis or the food crisis for the winter?
How about private property?
A better one than Gorbachev had, which was none.
Yeah.
I mean,
the big mistake Gorbachev makes is he kept using the word reform over and over again. You can't reform a buckboard into a Buick. You've got to get rid of the buckboard and buy a Buick. And what Yeltsin's willing to do is go with the Buick. And Gorbachev isn't quick enough to make that move.
John, the first thing they got to do is just take the whole Communist Party and throw it off the bridge, and then all things are possible.
All right, exit question. On a resurrection scale, meaning zero life, and 10 meaning metaphysical resurrection.
Right.
Absolute resurrection. Okay, what's the possibility, or what grade do you assign to the Communist Party of resurrecting itself now, 0 to 10?
I think the party is just about a 0, John, but there is a real possibility of tyranny, but I don't think it'll be communist tyranny.
That's right.
Paul?
0. I think it'll be about as effective as it was this week, which is ineffective.
Yeah, by the way, welcome back. I didn't have a chance to do so after a long hiatus. We'll try to give your career a little jiggle. Do you want to...
I'll give it a 2, and I could only come back under a different name, and that is if the Soviets have a really hard winter and the West doesn't do anything to help out. The conditions are right for
Chris has had a worse year than Gennady Yanayev.
But not as bad as Hugo. Hugo, by the way, committed suicide. Of course, maybe we shouldn't joke about that, and we're not joking about it. I mean, the final exit for him. But anyway, Chris, it's great having you. What was my question? My question is 0 chance of resurrection of the Communist Party. Issue 3, putsch for Bush, question mark. Just when the Democrats thought they had George Bush right where they wanted him, on the defensive for his domestic policy, or lack thereof, along came the Soviet coup, claiming, among other victims, the Democrats. This crisis in the Soviet Union will dominate the news for many days, and foreign policy plays directly to George Bush's strong suit. Political mavens say that it will take quite a while to turn public consciousness back to the U.S. domestic agenda. So little wonder that with fewer than 6 months to go, before the Iowa caucuses, only a single brave Democrat, ex-Senator Paul Tsongas of Massachusetts, has come forward to enter the presidential arena. Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa and Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas will probably announce their candidacies within the next few weeks. Otherwise, the field is barren, and made the more barren this week by the announcement of Senator Al Gore of Tennessee that he would also not run. Question: will the Soviet coup and the skillful handling of it by George Bush, admitted by Democrats, further chill potential Democratic candidacies? Chris Matthews.
Well, John, last Sunday on the talk shows, the Democrats were still trying to redefine the American presidency to be a sort of a super HEW secretary, labor, welfare, and education. Well, clearly, the events of the world have redefined the American presidency to be a global presidency. He's the electronic MC of the world. The president had a very weak Monday morning. He had a pretty good Monday afternoon, and he had probably the best Tuesday of any president in history. I thought Bush's performance was masterful before the cameras on Tuesday in the Rose Garden. He was so smart and so quick and appreciating the nuance of the role he had to play that no Democrat could have matched him. Right now in the polls, according to the New York Times
poll... What was wrong with his Monday performance?
He said that he thought that Yanayev, the coup leader, might truly be a reformer. That was a mistake. He was suggesting that we might tolerate the guy. By the afternoon, someone had said, Mr. President, it's time to take issue with these people.
Did you notice how his language in describing the coup went from extra-constitutional to illegal in 24 hours after John Major had gotten into the act? Did that show a little bit of pusillanimity on his part?
It shows flexibility. Now, Bush is now running 68% among Democrats in approvability. I think he could win the Democratic nomination if it was a national primary right now. He would kill Harkin. He'd kill
wait a minute. Let me hear that again.
Kill anybody running.
Bush is a
Republican. If he ran right now in the Democratic, if there was
George
a national
Bush, a Republican, was the Democratic, but he would
sweep the party right now.
Among the nuclear-free people.
No, but
Iowa. Come on,
I'm talking about Democrats who vote in general elections.
Voters, right? I want to hear from Chico.
68% he's running.
Well, that's right. He's not going to chill the Democratic field very much because it was already pretty chilled. I mean, you're going to have Harkin run. You're going to have Clinton run. You might have somebody get Mario Cuomo in the race sometime down in November or so. But this is just it just refocuses the attention on his strength, which is foreign policy. And from this, there are going to be a lot of other victories to flow. Cuba, Vietnam, other things down the line, they're going to play right to George Bush's strength.
Patrick.
Yeah. I think that Mr. Bush was behind the curve on Monday. I think when they went to the Ukraine, talked about suicidal nationalism and all that, it was a terrible mistake. Scowcroft tried to pull that back. But there's no doubt about it, when a global crisis like that, the president caught up with it, handled himself well during the week. There's now, John, an enormous stature gap. Everybody, when there's a crisis, we look to the first team. It's Bush, Baker, and all those guys. Nobody looks to Paul Tsongas. And there's no doubt about it. I mean,
when the party starts talking about making pilgrimages to get Senator Lloyd Bentsen to run, you know they're in trouble, because that's defeat with dignity. That is, guaranteed 44% of the vote. Exactly.
What about the Hamlet of Albany?
We've been waiting for him for so long. I don't know. I think maybe the public's getting a bit bored with him.
I think Gypsy Rose Lee was a better act.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I think we're tired of this.
I think the Democrats have to redefine this race. I mean, and look at it. You know, it's hard to unseat an incumbent president under the best or worst of circumstances. Sure. So they need to look at it sort of like the Olympic trials, getting ready for 96.
Well, they ought to look
creating a message.
They ought to look at it the way the Republicans looked at 64, which was, go with what you really believe in against somebody that's unbeatable, and at least prepare yourself for the future. 64 was the beginning of 25 years.
But a presidential candidate does not need foreign policy credentials. Look at Ronald Reagan in 1980.
Oh, Reagan had foreign policy credentials, my friend. He was a strong anti-communist and a nationalist when there were 52 hostages sitting in Tehran.
Yeah,
but he wasn't known as a foreign policy leader. He was governor of California.
But you agree with me? No, I don't agree with you, John. He had an issue. He had a case, a philosophy, and there's no issue for the Democrats. What are they going to argue against?
I think the last Democrat to run for the presidency, as Bush performed it this week, was John Kennedy, a man who had a foreign policy, a domestic policy, a social policy. The Democrats that run for president today sort of run as the domestic president. They say they're not really interested in being commander-in-chief. They're not really interested in being secretary of state. And if you say that up front, you're not going to get the public support.
They're all over the lot. Look at this Gephardt. He's running around saying, who lost Gorbachev? And Gorbachev is flying into Moscow on a plane.
On a political coup scale of 0 to 10, what's the possibility of the Democrats pulling off a coup against George Bush and winning the White House in 1992, 0 to 10?
As of right now, John, it's between 0 and 1.
Between 0 and 1. What do you think, Paul?
1 and 2, and only gets better if Dan Quayle stages his own coup.
Chris? I think if there's a second dip, it gets up to about 4, but I don't want to live in a country that bad off.
What do you think, Eleanor?
I'm going to give it a 4 because one thing we learned this week is how world events can turn upside down in a matter of hours. A year is a long time.
I'm with you, Eleanor. I'll give it a 1. Predictions, Pat.
Darman's January budget deficit will exceed $400 billion.
Paul.
Louisiana Democrat Bennett Johnston will endorse Clarence Thomas for the Supreme Court.
Democrats will win up to 60 seats in the U.S. Senate next year.
Hello.
Soviet defense budget is going to take a big dip, forcing the American defense spending down.
Senator Warren Rudman will not seek re-election in 92. P.S. We have been flooded with inquiries and opinions regarding a statement by the renowned Shakespearean savant and host of this program, who said last week, quote, "The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers." This is how it happened. Issue 2, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Shakespeare, Henry VI. To this, Mr. Buchanan interjected.
But incidentally, John, it was not Henry VI, it's Henry IV, Part 2.
Not so. Henry VI. Checked out.
And John.
Who said it? Who said it?
Was it Falstaff's friend?
Dick the Butcher said it. Pat, here is Shakespeare's Henry VI, Part 2. Check it out, page 131. An uncommon lapse for you, Pat, but a sad one nevertheless.
John,
next week,
this
John
does not compensate for all your failures on Gorbachev.
John Major golfs with George Bush and Kenny Bunkport. Bye-bye.
The McLaughlin Group.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group.
All of this is an outright lie against the people.
In actuality, there has been a crime against the state.
This is NBC Nightly News reported by Gary Gutley. Substituting tonight, John Cochran.
Good evening. The drama in Moscow continues with no let-up, and today we were hearing from other world capitals as well. At day's end, Boris Yeltsin looks stronger than ever. Mikhail Gorbachev looks weaker. The Baltics and other republics are closer to independence, and the Soviet military is in total disarray. Let's track the day's highlights. First, Yeltsin, who says Gorbachev was right to quit the Communist Party. But Yeltsin also says it is too late for Gorbachev to absolve himself of guilt in the coup. NBC News, meanwhile, obtains a tape of Gorbachev under house arrest, denying any part in the coup. President Bush hints the Baltic states may win their independence as early as tomorrow. And Gorbachev's top military advisor, Marshal Sergei Akromeyev, kills himself. Apparently another casualty of the coup that failed. NBC's Bob Abernathy has been taking all this in. Bob, conciliation does not seem to be Boris Yeltsin's middle name. He just keeps driving ahead like General George Patton, exploiting the weakness of his rivals, Gorbachev included.
John Yeltsin knows he's strong and he's making the most of it fast. He's now said on Russian television what others have muttered, that Gorbachev himself is partially responsible for last week's coup.
You cannot take all the blame from him. Who chose the officials? He did. Who confirmed them? He did. He was betrayed by the people closest to him, people he chose himself.
Yeltsin again thanked the people who had defended the Russian White House and refused a Gorbachev offer to make him a hero of the Soviet Union, saying that honor should go to the people. He said the coup leaders failed to understand that the Russian people are no longer afraid.
These irresponsible, mindless people thought they could bring Russia to its knees. It's just laughable.
Yeltsin described elaborate plans by the coup leaders to storm his headquarters and capture or kill him. But he said a KGB assault team refused to attack.
That was a complete surprise for the whole KGB leadership. They tried to coerce them, threaten them with trials, execution, and so on. But of the 20 or so leaders of Alpha Group, not one agreed.
Over the past several days, Yeltsin has used his new popularity relentlessly to take power from Gorbachev. Yeltsin claims control of state communications, Communist Party and KGB archives, and the Soviet army in Russia. Yeltsin has forced Gorbachev to appoint his nominees as heads of the Defense and Interior Ministries and the KGB. And Yeltsin's prime minister is now in charge of nominating all Gorbachev's new cabinet, cleaning out everyone who supported the coup.
It turns out there were far more participants than we had originally imagined. There will have to be a lot of changes.
With Yeltsin taking more and more power for Russia, and with one republic after another declaring its independence, the country's Supreme Soviet meets tomorrow to try to reform the government. But it's not at all clear how much political power the Kremlin has left. John?
Bob, we'll get back to you shortly, but now let's move over to your colleague in Moscow, Arthur Kent, for the background on an extraordinary videotape first revealed earlier today on NBC. A tape Gorbachev made secretly while under house arrest. Arthur, how did he do it?
Well, John, Gorbachev made this secret home videotape appeal on the second night of his captivity, after he'd seen the coup leaders on Soviet television claiming that he was ill and needed a rest. Now, while the soldiers guarding the family were sleeping, Gorbachev crept into an upstairs room of his dacha in the Crimea, and with his son-in-law operating the camera, he made 4 separate messages to set the record straight. Now, each message was pulled out of the videotape cassette and given to various trusted aides, with Gorbachev keeping one roll on his person. What he was hoping to do was to pass it to someone who would in turn relay it to Moscow and reveal that the Gorbachev family was held hostage.
The tape begins with a sequence of Gorbachev's granddaughter, Anastasia, dancing. A home video session before soldiers supporting the coup put the Gorbachev family in detention. Then, the man who had been one of the world's most powerful leaders appealed for his truth to be heard.
I must say at once that there has been a deception of the people. And on the basis of this deception, this lie, there has been an anti-constitutional coup.
Gorbachev was free, the coup foiled, before any of the 4 taped messages could be smuggled to Moscow. The Soviet leader proudly displayed his copy in a news conference Thursday. But by then, sympathy for Gorbachev was fading, especially in Boris Yeltsin's White House, replaced by anger over his stubborn defense of the Communist Party. Today, the Soviet president was in his office, a leader with few political options and dwindling authority.
And Gorbachev was meeting today with his top advisors in a political damage control session. Boris Yeltsin, meanwhile, was not salvaging power. He was exercising it. John?
Arthur, a question for you and Bob Abernathy. After NBC showed that Gorbachev tape earlier today, Soviet TV broadcast it tonight. Any chance that it will create some sympathy for him? If anyone could use some good public relations, it is Mikhail Gorbachev. Bob, you first.
I don't think so. I think he came back from his captivity. You would have expected a lot of sympathy then. The man who had been held hostage, who had been betrayed by his friends. But there wasn't much sympathy for him because, as Yeltsin said today, all the people here have been saying, but he appointed, he approved the very people who betrayed him. So I don't think I think if there was not sympathy then, it's hard to expect it now.
I think you're right, Bob. John, the fact of the matter is that looking at this videotape tonight, I think many Russians would see a rather pathetic figure before them, a man humbled by his captors, people who public opinion has been running against for a long time. As Bob said, people who the public quite clearly warned Gorbachev against.
Well, this is a very difficult time for Gorbachev, John. His wife is ill. He has suffered terribly because of what has happened. He does not appear the man he used to be.
Let me ask you quickly now, in the eyes of the Russian people, if Gorbachev is so down, can Boris Yeltsin do no wrong now, even when he is wrong? Quick answers from both of you. Bob?
Oh, no, I think, Bob, I think you would have to agree that so many of the people that we talk to on the street here see a very dangerous streak in Boris Yeltsin, an ambitious man who has within him a type of dictatorial streak all his own.
And one other point. The revolution has been wonderful, and lots of people here are happy, but all the problems are ahead, John. They've still got to deal with these tough questions of what to do about the economy.
A continuing story. Bob and Arthur, I envy you. You're in the middle of a great story. Next up, freedom seems so close for the Baltics. So close.
If you're using non-aspirin pain relievers, you should know about
their independence. Belarusia in the northwest and Moldavia in the southwest both said they want out of the Soviet Union. The 3 Baltic republics, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, were among the first to break away. As NBC's Dennis Murphy reports tonight from Latvia, people there say independence can't come soon enough.
Alfred Rubiks, the first secretary of Latvia's Communist Party, won't be showing up for work Monday. The party headquarters was seized Friday by Latvian police. The building is sealed off. The floor is strewn with documents that party workers tried to destroy. They burned intelligence files in the bathroom. Police found files that the party kept on intellectuals and reformers.
This is the desk that belonged to the Communist Party boss here in Riga. He's in jail now. And this man is a prosecutor, an investigator with the police department. He's going through the desk, finding old memos, shredded documents, looking for the names of the collaborators, the people who participated with the hardliners from Moscow, and looking for ways in general that the party ran its business in this country.
By the secretary's desk, they found a phone that rings directly to the Soviet Army barracks and to the hated Black Beret commandos. Lenin is still on the wall of the party secretary's office, but overnight, his statue was toppled from its pedestal in downtown Riga. Latvians couldn't believe he was gone. Hot debates about the past, the future shot through the crowd.
Independence now is a real fact.
This young Latvian hopes to go back to his grandfather's farm that Stalin collectivized so disastrously in the 50s. Lenin is gone. Now the Latvians are talking about a Nuremberg-like tribunal for his men who took the hard line and lost it all. Dennis Murphy, NBC News, Riga, Latvia.
How long will it be before the United States and the other major Western democracies recognize the Baltic republics as free, independent countries? Well, judging by what the president and his top aides had to say today, not long at all. NBC's Jim Milkoshevsky is with the president in Kennebunkport. Jim?
John, if President Bush doesn't appear to be in any particular hurry to push harder for Baltic independence, it's because he's convinced it's going to happen anyway, with or without him. As Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney arrived at Kennebunkport, worldwide pressure was building on President Bush to do something about the Baltics. Bush is already behind. Many European allies have already begun moves to restore diplomatic ties. A motorcade of demonstrators streamed past the president's compound, pushing for Baltic independence.
You clearly have reformists and the democratic movements in control. They do not oppose independence for the Baltics. To wait now is, I'm not sure what he would be waiting for.
But Bush may not wait long. U.S. officials say that a resolution for Baltic independence will be offered during tomorrow's meeting of the Supreme Soviet. And Bush was playing it coy.
Everyone knows our politics. We want to see the Baltics free. But let's see what happens tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting day.
Pressures are also mounting to provide the Soviets more immediate, direct economic aid. But U.S. officials are standing fast. No economic reform, no economic aid.
I said they had to demonstrate a determination that economic reform move forward just as they have that political reform move forward.
But U.S. officials do expect economic reforms to move at a faster pace. They add that the U.S. is ready to provide humanitarian aid to help the Soviets through the winter. But there is one more dilemma. Who's in charge, Gorbachev or Yeltsin? Officially, the U.S. says Gorbachev because he's the constitutional leader. But one senior Bush official says the Soviets and the U.S. would be better off with Yeltsin.
Boris Yeltsin, at this point, represents a set of principles and values that are synonymous with those that we hold for the Soviet Union. Democratization, demilitarization.
But one key ally warns not to write off Gorbachev just yet.
So Mr. Gorbachev still has a role to play, still has an important role to play. And I think while he's playing that role, I look forward to doing business with Mr. Gorbachev and with Mr. Yeltsin and with the leaders of the other republics.
The Bush administration is not exactly writing off Gorbachev, but they certainly are leaning more heavily today towards Yeltsin than they were a couple of days ago. Nothing personal, just pragmatic politics. John?
Well, Jim, it seems that, in effect, the United States is currying favor with Boris Yeltsin. Is that right?
Well, they do know that tough times lie ahead for the Soviet people. Boris Yeltsin has proven to be a leader, and they want to back a winner for now.
Okay, Jim, I'll join you in Kennebunkport tomorrow morning. Thank you. We'll get the perspective of a Soviet expert on today's developments in a moment. What do all the dramatic events in the Soviet Union today mean? What comes next? Joining us once again this evening from our Washington Bureau is a leading expert on Soviet affairs, Dmitry Symes. Dmitry, if I may be so familiar, first, let's talk about the man everyone else is talking about, Boris Yeltsin. We have a pretty good handle on his achievements and his courage, but are you getting concerned about what sometimes looks like arrogance more than confidence? Do you spot some instability, which can be dangerous in a political leader?
John, let me start with arrogance. Boris Yeltsin is a man of an enormous self-confidence. If he was not so self-confident, it would be very difficult for him to move against incredible odds. At first against Gorbachev, against hardliners in the Gorbachev government, and finally against the coup. Yeltsin takes himself very seriously. He has a unique bond with the people. Most reformers around him are intellectuals, distinguished people, but they do not have the same bond with the people. Yeltsin is the man of the hour, perhaps of the week, perhaps of the year. This is necessary for him to lead the Soviet Union out of trouble. It is also potentially dangerous. Instability. Well, of course he is unstable. This is a man who was a product of the Soviet system, and suddenly he rejects the party. When he is expelled from the Central Committee, he refuses to become a non-person. He fights, he struggles. He is an unusual person. He is very unpredictable. Again, his weaknesses are another side of his strengths.
Dmitry, do you think that Yeltsin wants Mikhail Gorbachev simply to quit, to retire to his dacha, to get out of the way? Or do you think he wants Gorbachev to stay on as a figurehead? Could he be useful to Yeltsin as a figurehead?
I think that they need somebody to be Soviet president. Make no mistake, John, nobody wants to take over the Soviet Union. And the problem is that nobody understands what Gorbachev is in charge of. He's certainly not in charge of the Russian Republic. Other republics are proclaiming independence. And before these people are able to sort out what exactly these declarations of independence is, are indeed the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, completely leaving the Soviet Union, I have to say that the job of the national president will not have too many applicants. So I suspect that they would like to keep Gorbachev for a while. But that is possible only if first he agrees to play along with Yeltsin, and second, if there is no incriminating evidence against him that he knew too much about the coup.
Dmitry, we just have a few moments left. The new Soviet defense minister said today that 80% of the Soviet military commanders will be replaced. Is that a little scary? Are they moving too fast? Could this encourage another coup?
It is encouraging in a sense that most senior Soviet military commanders are not top professionals, but are rather political types in uniform. They are not competent, they are products of the old regime. Yet, the army is probably the only institution which is still functioning in the country, and Boris Yeltsin and Gorbachev may leave themselves without any instrumentality of power during very troubled times.
Dmitry Symes, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
In a moment, trouble in the Balkans, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Mr. Bolshevik. But Lenin's tomb, that landmark outside the Kremlin, remains. And NBC's Jim Maceda went on site there to find out what people are saying there now that they no longer have to whisper.
This is where, for generations, the Secretary Generals of the Communist Party have come to pay their respects, to oversee grand moments, grand social moments like parades. Are you here to see the changing of the guard? Are you here to see Lenin's tomb? Why have you come?
Lenin for the Soviet people is very dear. That's what we were taught. That's why we come.
Oh, come on, you're speaking from a textbook.
People will come and take Lenin's body out.
If they come here and attack this tomb, would you sit back and watch them and agree with them and applaud them, or would you feel like something horrible has happened?
It would be barbaric. Where would it stop? If we topple all the monuments, what becomes of us?
But it's a symbol of Bolshevism.
So what? It's history. But why so many monuments? There are more monuments than public toilets.
It's absolutely quiet. No jeering, no protest. Changing of the guard in front of Lenin's tomb is taking place just as it always has, every hour, on the hour, for the past 67 years.
I'm very old. Please, these days are very tough for me.
It's difficult for him to talk.
He's a communist.
Can we go on this side and take some pictures of the gallery of Secretary General? Is Gorbachev part of this world, or is he the last of this world or the first of a new world?
I don't know, but I respect Gorbachev. My idea is to put a plaque on the wall here which reads, "Here lies the leader of the communist ideal, who turned out to be a fake, like Utopia."